Welcome back, everyone, for the second day of our International Women's Day North America Summit. It's great to see you all tuning in again. Hope you all enjoyed the first day sessions with us. If you didn't join the first day, my name is Kübra Zengin, and I'm the regional lead for Google Developer Groups and Women Tech Makers programs for the North America region at Google.
And I'm Karina Liu, also on the North America Developer Ecosystem team at Google, supporting our Google Developer Groups and Women Tech Maker communities.
Hang tight, because we have another day full of inspirational talks and technical content coming from the leaders across Google and our community. This IWD summit wouldn't have been possible without the dedicated time and effort of our amazing North America developer community organizers who have collectively helped to put together this two-day event for you all to enjoy. Before we jump into the talks, just a quick reminder. Be excellent to each other. We want to continue to provide a safe environment for you to enjoy the learnings, speakers, and networking. So for any reason you have concerns, please let us know. There is also the link shared here to submit a form. Just a reminder, this is an inclusive conference with a zero tolerance for any form of harassment. Secondly, feel free to share your questions with the speakers on the chat. They will be answering some of your questions here. Our team will also be available to help with any questions you may have. Also, there's a Slack group where you can join to connect and network with other participants at this event. We also appreciate your input, so feel free to share your feedback. There are some awesome raffle prizes that will be up for grabs that you will be interested in to win once you complete it. And lastly, don't forget to use these hashtags to share your photos and memorable moments from the event with us on your socials. Also have fun. All right, who is ready to get started? Without further ado, I'm excited to welcome our panel of women trailblazers who will be sharing their experiences and journeys into tech, how they were able to pivot to a new role, chart their own course, and how you can do it too. Join us today to welcome Alana, Elise, Janine, Julissa, and Syreea who work on different teams at Google.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Pivots and Career Journeys of Women in Tech panel. I'll be your facilitator today. My name is Janine Lee, and I'm a Global Learning and Development Manager focused on career development in the Google Data Center organization. I'm going to first start with introducing our panelists today. We have Alana Karen, who's the Director of Search Platforms, Elise Birkhofer, Global Head of Women's Community and Programs, Julissa Ramirez, Technical Program Manager of Google Cloud, and Syreea Hughley, Head of Customer Service Training and Communications for Google Fiber. Thank you all for being here with us today. As we get started, I'd love for each panelist to just take some time to share what we call your origin story. So how did you get to your current role and to the tech world? We'll start with Alana.
I was back in college and I was getting really interested in what was then just starting back in the day around web design. And that led me down the road of practicing that in my spare time and self-teaching, and then getting my first job as a webmaster, which then later on led to startups, one of them being Google. And I've been here 19 years now. So I've had various roles, all in operations. So that's essentially how I've gotten in brief to where I am.
Thank you, Alana. I think you might have the longest tenure at Google for someone that I've ever met. We're gonna then move on to Elise.
Sure. So I grew up in the Bay Area in Silicon Valley and studied psychology and communication at Stanford, and was really fascinated in how the internet was changing our world and helping us with so much innovation. So came to Google straight after school, started in our marketing organization for a number of years, and have pivoted into my current role heading up our women's community.
That's amazing. Thank you, Elise. And I think we'll want to hear more about your pivots as we go along with the panel. We're going to move on to Julissa.
Hi, everyone. So I immigrated from the Dominican Republic when I was 9 years old, and then grew up in New York City my whole life. Moved on and graduated from my university with an undergrad in electrical and mechanical engineering degree, and a master's in manufacturing mechanical systems from a school upstate New York, Rochester. Woo-hoo. Then I moved to California, where I started my first job as a manufacturing engineer, working on a missile launch tube program at Northrop Grumman. Moved on to Intel, where I spent majority of my career, and that led me to the TPGM world. And then I started knowing that, yes, I love being technical, but I also love and enjoy working with engineers, presenting data to execs, and driving processes to completion. And that led me to my current role at Google as a TPGM in cloud.
Thank you, Julissa. It sounds like you've moved around quite a bit and you have a very interesting background. So thank you for sharing that with us. And last but not least, Syreea.
Hi, everyone. My career actually started in a very different space. My undergraduate was actually biology, pre-med. When I made the determination that medicine was not for me, I moved into environmental sciences. And due to the downturn of the economy, I did have time to think through like what would be my next steps a decade ago related to my career, which landed me at Turner Broadcasting, which is now Warner Media, where I was responsible for, in the learning and development space, technology training programs for 17,000 employees. I did that for a little while, and then all things Google interested me related to learning and development because of my true passion for people learning. And I felt that Google understood that. So a few years ago, I started at Google Fiber, to where I built up brick and mortar for a 25,000 square foot training facility to train on all things Google Fiber. Through promotions and pivots, changes, my role has changed in a great way. I now lead the learning and development team for a few channels across Google Fiber, along with customer service, and it's been a great journey.
It's amazing, Syreea. I think we share the same passion for learning and development, so thank you for being here today. All right, we're going to get started with some of our first questions. So you've all become leaders at one of the top tech companies in the world, which itself is really difficult. But on top of that, you'd had to work your way up into a space where women are disproportionately underrepresented in tech. What has that journey been, and how did you navigate that? Syreea, would you like to kick us off?
Absolutely. So coming out of a corporate space before I joined technology, there's always that hierarchy of white males. And so I learned how to navigate outside of a technology space. So when I came into a technology space, I thought that I could navigate the same, and that just come in, lead your teams, do a great job, set priorities based on the prioritization of the work. And I can remember being at Turner Broadcasting on one of my first projects that I led. For any of our global initiatives, we would have to come, all of the leads would have to come into a war room. Everyone's familiar with that in the technology space. I was in the war room with all the different leads, and people were going around and introducing themselves, just getting my space set up. And I can remember a white male, we'll call him Joe. He introduced himself to me and his role. But when I introduced myself to him, I just introduced myself and my team. He responded by saying to me, "Oh, you must be sitting in for Sam." Sam was an amazing white male on my team that was a true asset, but I was the actual lead. And when I corrected him, he kind of laughed it off and walked away. It was in that moment that I made the determination that when I show up in a technology space, that I will purposely show up and take up room. I will purposely make sure that I introduce myself to those that are known. I will make sure that they understand my role and position within the technology space. And I will make sure that people understand the leverage, the background, and the experience that I have. And you can still do it in a meaningful way. So the way I've navigated is to make sure that I purposely take up space and make room for my team to make sure people have an understanding that as a woman of color, I can lead in technology.
Thank you, Syreea. That was a really nice story to share. Did anyone have other stories or other thoughts about this topic that they wanted to share?
That was just so good. Why spoil it with more? I do think that that's just a major theme, that as a woman in technology, you might come in and have some natural imposter syndrome. And then it can get nurtured by just sort of the things that you run into, the fact that you're alone, But there are moments where you're definitely going to have to intentionally take up space and find support if you're struggling to do that. Who can you partner with ahead of that meeting so they help give you space or call on you if others aren't? Or just the support that you need behind the scenes when you have a rough day and you want to ask someone, was that mansplaining or was that just me being sensitive? And so then you get outside perspective. And I think that those things, hopefully in the future we won't have to do them. But I think for now, they're amazing, helpful tools to help you navigate your career here.
Thank you, Alana. And just as a follow-up question, how do you both feel that the gender landscape may have changed since you started working in tech? I know some of you have a much longer tenure than others, but have you seen the landscape change?
Can I add here just something really quickly? One thing that I dealt with was sexual harassment when I started my career as the only female in my floor, the only one under 40 at the time, under 50 when I started my career. And it was very difficult. It was very difficult. And I know a lot of women that go through this, and it deters them from continuing a career in tech. I think things have changed dramatically since that happened to me. Because now I think just in general, we have more resources, more aware with the Me Too movement and everything that has happened. We know that these stories are real. So any woman that's out there that's going through something similar, I would just say, make sure that you reach out to someone, make sure that you go to your HR, make sure that you have a partner inside. I just know that's one of the toughest things, I would say, working in a male-dominated field.
Mm. Yeah, and I would say that I think that that's a huge, what you're talking about is like, I think if you're looking at the pure numbers, we still have so far to go in terms of feeling like we've made meaningful strides for women and for other minoritized populations. So it's hard, like with numbers, like, like, oh, was I like, it used to be I was the only one in the room. Now there's like 3 of us. Like, I think it's hard sometimes in numbers to feel the huge difference. But if you look in attitudes and awareness and the dialogue and the number of training courses we all go to now to make us aware of what harassment looks like, or even microaggressions, I think all of that has changed a ton. And it's hard to quantify, I think, sometimes all of those things. But I know going from never talking about it to having it be a major topic that you can find multiple trainings a month about, you can go to author talks about it, you can work with your employee resource groups to have chats where you're really talking through all of the issues. I mean, just the amount is, I could like 100x, 1000x. I can't, it's always hard to put numbers on this, but such a big difference from the early days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I've really seen a shift in leadership commitment, and, Google starting to share our numbers externally to really create some transparency and accountability. And from the numbers perspective, we actually have changed since we started releasing numbers in 2014. We had about 20% women in leadership roles, about 1 in 5. And in 2020, we announced we were almost at 27%. So more than, 1 in 4 of our leaders now are women. So we are seeing that shift. It's slow. Progress is not fast enough as much as we all want to see, but it is really helpful to see that leadership awareness and increasing accountability to really shift the industry.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that. It segues me into kind of the next topic here, and I've heard many of you talk about this already. So while there were so many battles to fight, walls to climb, caverns to cross, there's events, people's allies, inflection points that really maybe helped create the opportunity for us. Can you speak maybe in your experiences with respect to your career in the tech ecosystem, and how and when did you encounter that experience? What did it look like, and how has it impacted your journey?
I I can speak here and say that one of the things that I did as I took a lean into technology in the organization, being in a support role in an operational space, I always wanted to make sure that I sought out mentors from a senior leadership level where I wasn't afraid to reach out to the director for one-on-one time or get time on an SVP's calendar or a CEO's calendar for a product area, just so I have that opportunity to challenge myself and to learn and to grow. So that's one of the ways that I've navigated, even though in my vertical, I have a sincere passion of learning and development and will geek out with anyone all day long. I consistently challenge myself to put myself in positions to where I'm attempting to learn something new from someone that's been down that road. And then the other part of that navigation is then paying it forward at my level to those that are coming along the way.
That's great. And Julissa, what people or organizations have helped support your journey?
So for me, when I moved to the Bay Area, being from New York City, I really missed community. So for me, building community was my main focus as soon as I got here. So organizations like SHEP, SWE, High Tech, and ERGs were huge for me. I learned early on that I had to build almost like board of directors of like strong women to guide me through the landscapes of the things that I was going through that were new to me. I'm the first in my family to graduate from college, let alone be an engineer. I had no blueprint of what to do in situations from a corporate perspective. So I surrounded myself with just incredible people that have really helped me along the way, to the point where I got at Intel an opportunity that was created for me, for my skill set, because of a sponsor spoke for me and advocated on my behalf. So I do think that community building and, to Syreea's point, making sure that you find people that see things in you that you might not see for yourself, that's really important.
That's awesome. Let's talk a little bit more about mentorship and sponsorship. Elise, do you want to share a little bit more about your experience with mentors and sponsors?
Yeah, so I've had luckily some really great managers that served in that role of both mentor and sponsor as well. And I know that's not the case for everyone, but particularly one of my last managers in the marketing organization really took me under his wing, helped me build the skills that I needed to get to the next level, helped to give me opportunities to have more visibility, leading high profile projects, allowing me to come to present to senior stakeholders in meetings that I might not normally have been invited to, helped not only promote me in the marketing organization, but then when I decided I wanted to make a pivot into our people work and really helping support our diversity, equity, and inclusion, also made connections for me, really helped me explore that, and was willing to, even though it was going to mean he had to find someone new for his team, knew that it was going to be the right thing for me overall to be in a role that I felt more passionate about. And so he was not only supporting that, helping me create space on the side to be networking and doing some side projects that helped me validate my desire to move into that pivot. So really being honest with my manager about what I wanted to do to both grow in my level and also think about my next move within the company was really valuable. And outside of normal managers, I'd say also our employee resource groups have been really valuable. We have a huge women's network and 16 other employee resource groups. So being able to meet people from different roles and help build those relationships that can help you explore what might be next for you, who are those folks that can support you in your mobility journey, is really a valuable one to be tapping into those folks that can then give you advice, give you honest feedback, and help advocate and make opportunities available to you.
Thank you. I was just going to follow up and ask, there's probably folks on this call that want to learn about how to find a mentor or how to find a sponsor. And I think you've already answered that, Elise. But if anyone has any other suggestions for women who are looking to find a mentor or looking to find a sponsor, I'd love for you to share some tips with our audience today.
Well, I think they're pretty different, and sometimes we lump them together. A mentor is someone you're going to learn from, and hopefully it's a win-win relationship where they get a lot out of talking with you as well. But I think it is somewhat straightforward to think about people who you want to learn from. And I think sometimes we put a really high bar on that and think like, oh, this is someone I want to marry. But I think that really you can think about like, oh, no, you're going on a nice date, and maybe even a speed date. And like, I have 3 questions for you. And I'm going to write you and say, I have these 3 questions for you. Can I spend a half hour with you and pick your brain? Or can we, have a virtual coffee right now? Maybe one day we'll get back to real coffees. And I think that that is a really easy, low bar way to start to form these relationships, these touch points. And yes, maybe over time they turn into a monthly meeting and you build this long-term mentor relationship. But it might just be that you go to them because you know they are good at something. Sponsors are somewhat different because, as some people have talked about in some of their answers, it is someone else seeing something in you. And because of that, they are motivated to sponsor you, to show you things that maybe you didn't even see, to point out things about things that you're good at that you didn't even know, to talk to you about opportunities that maybe you wouldn't otherwise hear about. That I think is a little bit harder to just go out and be like, today I'm going to get a sponsor. That's a little bit more about starting to build a long-term relationship with people who are more senior than you. Can you, for instance, get on your director's calendar every so often and start to build that relationship? If it's someone just in a totally different field, but you know that you want to get into security engineering, for example, can you start to build that relationship? And over time, it's them taking you under their wing. So that one's a little bit less in your control, but building the relationship is, in both cases, the key to learning and to getting advice and to maybe leading to better things.
Thank you, Alana. That was a nice description of explaining the difference between mentorship and sponsorship. And you're right, it takes that little step to just say, is this person the right fit? And sometimes it's a one-time thing and you gain so much out of it, or you get mentors that are for multiple different things in your career. So I really like how you explained that. I think we are now kind of getting to a point where we could talk a little bit more about your career journeys. And some of you have shared that you've moved around, whether it be different industries, roles, or throughout the company. So I'd like to talk a little bit more about what happens when you discover that there might be a mismatch between the role you're in and what you're good at and what you're inspired to do. And what advice would you give to someone who's in that position to pivot? And how have you done that yourself in your career? Maybe Syreea, we'll start with you.
Sure. One thing I always have the analogy of matriculating through grade school, middle school, junior, senior, and then whatever undergraduate and postgraduate information. At every single point, you're always working to do the next best thing. And so holistically, we take that entire thought process into our corporate environment, into our professions. And I can speak for myself. I always assume that I would always be doing and aspiring to that next best thing. But I have come up against misalignments in the 2 decades of working. But the one thing I did not grasp in the beginning, but I do gather now, is even with any of those misalignments where you thought that this role was going to be the absolute best role for you, I had to learn how to take 2 or 3 nuggets of things that I still learned in that role. So will I navigate to something else? Will it be a linear move instead of a promotion? Probably, because there's a misalignment here. But I can still have lessons learned based on the projects that I worked on, based on the team members that I interacted with, based on me selecting this role and looking for another role and looking at things to actually look at when I'm talking to a hiring manager or meeting with team members. So the one thing that I would like for everyone to take away from this is sometimes it's not a move for promotion when you have misalignments. You could have lateral moves and you still need to take the things that you learned from that situation to become a better employee, a better professional, and a better human being.
Thank you, Syreea.
Can I add to that just a little bit? You just reminded me of something really powerful that I've read, that it's called destination addiction. When it's that we are so focused on what the next thing is that we forget to respect the opportunity, which is one of the things that I love about the 3 respects. And respecting the opportunity sometimes means that, did I give this opportunity? Did I squeeze all the juice out of this opportunity before I'm already thinking, oh, I want this next thing, I want this next other outcome. So thank you for that, Syreea.
Yeah, I would just add, and this isn't meant to be a devil's advocate or anything, it's actually to add on to that, is that I think what I like about all of this is the idea of being deliberate. Because I think sometimes when we feel like we're in a bad situation, our instinct is to flee, and that's pretty natural. But I think sometimes in fleeing, you don't make the smartest decisions, right? Like you just grab what you can and you run, and you might run to the wrong place. You might not respect the opportunity and take what you could from it. At the same time, I also see that sometimes we stay too long. We keep trying, we think it's us. And so what I really am counseling people to do is be deliberate. You know, figure out what's going on. See whether there's a couple things that you want to try before you move on to make things go better. To maybe it's the culture that you feel misaligned with and you feel like there are things that you can try there. Maybe there's some things that you want to do before you move on because you're a manager. Whatever it is, be deliberate, do those things, but then set a timeline, set a deadline for yourself. And if you're not feeling better, if it is not better, if it is still misaligned, then very deliberately decide what you're going to next, what you're going to do next, so that you don't get to this place where you feel powerless and like you can't take the next steps that you need to, and that your career isn't in your hands.
That's great. Thank you, Alana. So what types of tools or resources would you recommend to our audience to help find the right role for them? Are there specific tools or resources that you yourselves have used or that you would recommend as they're going through this journey?
The silence may be because there's no magic here, right? I think a lot of us are just using whatever we can when we can find it. I'll throw out one, and then maybe each of us can throw out one. I found it helpful to think about my job search as a job port, like almost like how you applied to schools. Maybe if you applied to colleges where you had safe schools, reach schools, and dream schools. But I found it really helpful to think of my opportunities there and pick some safe roles, like, you know, that just might be posted that you feel like you meet all the job criteria for, but also pick some ones that seem out of reach and explore them. And so that can just be off of the job boards, or it can be because you heard about them separately. But I think I found it as a tool really nice. So I don't I push myself to reach for things, but I also, there's a piece of me. Okay, everybody's barking and ringing. Anyway, there's a piece of me that wants to feel really safe. And so anyway, you get the point. Go on without me.
I think Alana brings up a really good point. The one thing that I have tapped into in many instances along my career is my network. And so a lot of times you're in a role where that may be like a mismatch or misposition for you, but it seems to come a little bit clearer when you talk to people in other areas of your business that, oh, wait a minute, they're facing the same challenges, the same problems, because, you know, there could be a strategy misalignment within the organization itself. But my network has been an abundance of help in helping me navigate.
Yeah, I was going to say plus.
Oh, go ahead, Elise. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll just quickly build on that. I was going to say relationship building as well, both to get perspective about what might be available and next for me, as well as actually unlocking opportunities. Folks that I reached out to or did a project with or had networked with, later became opportunities to move into the team full time. So really thinking of rebranding networking, if it sounds scary, is just authentic relationship building, right? How do I get to know somebody, understand their role, understand their team and their needs in ways that might end up opening something up for me later on.
What I was going to say was, I think it depends on where you are in your career journey, right? Because I've had instances where I had to look at what my values are. And let's say I was in a psychologically unsafe situation. My values are to find psychological safety, find a manager that believes in me, and or get parity on, whatever, getting paid, all of these different things, depending on where you're at and what your struggles are. I think that those things become like more valuable than others. So that would be my advice, is just to do a value landscape situation where you understand what is most important for you at that time.
That's great. So I'm going to pivot the conversation a bit here. So I understand some of you are moms. So can you tell me a little bit about what it was like to transition your lifestyle as a mom working in tech? And what advice would you give either current moms or future moms to be? And let's start with Julissa.
So I'm not a mom, but I am an expecting mom. I'm expecting a baby in 8 weeks, and he's just kicking right now. He's like, yeah. What I will share is that this has been a very transformational journey. I'm not even there yet. Just the things that I'm having to take into consideration as of right now. And I also want to acknowledge my privilege in the fact that because of the pandemic and because I've been able to work from home, I've been like, what is that called? Nauseous, and been able to do it at home and turn off my camera, where a lot of women aren't afforded these opportunities. I'm joining these mom groups where women are saying, oh, I only get 6 weeks of maternity leave. And here at Google, we're so fortunate. So just learning all these things because of the experience that I'm going through has put like a different perspective. First of all, if you're a mom, like, power on. I will never take my mom for granted. Not that I ever did, but I will never take her for granted ever again. That's all I want to share.
Janine, this is a topic that I could talk about all day because I love being a mother. It has been a challenge, but I always identified myself as this professional that could just do it all. And then I became a mother, and I had to go through like this full transformation, because that over everything is my number one priority and main job. The two things that have helped me pivot as a mother working in corporate America that still wanted to be that leader, still wanted to do all things technology, was one, having a sound support system, and two, like setting boundaries related to my family and what that time looks like. Like on the support system side, I cannot tell everyone how many opportunities that I've turned down just because I have to be in a space where my village is, where my family is, my mother's, my father's, so that I have the opportunity to travel 40, 50% of the time in order to complete my job. And then around setting boundaries, it's like being in control and having input into, like, when something as simple as a conference or a networking event or things that take you away from the home, I'm always at the front of the table looking at the baseball schedule, the recital schedule, and saying, how can I pivot these things? And it's not an easy plight, but I've taken several red-eye flights to make sure that I could see my son hit the home run or make it to that parent-teachers conference. But it hasn't been perfect all the time. Like sometimes I get the tablet up at the game so I can see, but I do make it a point to keep my support system intact and clearly set boundaries so that I have that balance. But it's all worth it. It's all absolutely worth it.
I hope so. I'm just kidding.
Well, I'll just piggyback on that. And just because you made me think of something that I'll often say, which is like, if someone asks me, like, what do I think about this having it all concept? I'll say, well, like, are we talking about over a lifetime? I think that sometimes we try to have it all now. And what happens when you're a mom is you will literally see the hours of the day run out. It'll be like 10:30 p.m. and you'll be like, should I shower now? Like, will I have time in the morning? Like, how is this going to work? And that's like for a shower, let alone like yoga, like self-care, like all of the fancy words we throw out nowadays. And so while I love it in some respects because it's led me to like true prioritization, like I do not have time for us to get out of this meeting without some clear action items because this has got to make progress. Like this is it. This is the meeting. I think it's also been a little bit about deciding like, okay, I don't need to do it all right now. Like this year, because pandemic, I've got to spend more time helping my 12-year-old through school. And it means like I'm definitely not going to be able to do some of the side activities I like to do both at work and outside. Or I take on less of it in order to make that pivot. But next year, you know, maybe it'll be different, right? So you can kind of pivot and have some goals and know that careers are long, right? Like nowadays, most of us are going to work multiple decades, right? And so thinking about like, okay, well, maybe these 2 years, I'm going to focus on like getting back to a normal sleep schedule. And then I'll make that big career pivot. I think that sometimes helps, especially with our own feelings of like pressure we put on ourselves. It's not that you're saying never, it just might not be this 6 months right now.
That's great. Thank you all so much for sharing that. And Julissa, congratulations. We'd love to hear more how your journey goes as a mom in tech. I'd love to now just talk a little bit about some of you that have moved from an IC, what we call an individual contributor role, to a people manager role. Could you share a little bit about how that transition was for you, and maybe a little bit about that journey, how you made that transition from your first IC role to being a people manager for the first time?
Oh, badly. I feel like I'm always interjecting when there's silence, but like I'll it was hard. I was really, really good at being an individual contributor. And I thought maybe for the first 6 months, I was hitting it out of the ballpark with management. And then I started to get feedback about how I just really wasn't a great manager. Like I wasn't taking time to foster people and coach them and help them through their journey. I was still treating it like a checkbox on my list, which I'd always been very good at. And so I do think that we shouldn't be too hard on ourselves. It's a real journey to do, but I also think like we should knowingly, like if you just sort of get plopped into management, I think sometimes we might not sort of internalize that and knowingly start to shift away from all of our IC projects to spending more time with our people, understanding what their challenges are, what their career goals are, et cetera. And so this can kind of sneak up on us and we can get maybe some of this feedback at first. So I guess my main tip is if you can go into it knowingly, get some advice from people who've done this before and spend some time with your people, listening to them, and do it with a lot more intention. I think that's the best way to do it. Now, that said, just listen to the feedback later. You know, I think sometimes our first instinct too might be to push away the feedback. So if you start to get the feedback as you are going through that transition, just know that that's actually pretty normal. And it probably means there's something a little off in your IC balance. I wrote a whole series of articles on LinkedIn about how I did this terribly and how I got performance feedback over the years. So feel free if you want to know more to see my huge mea culpa to my poor early guinea pigs at Google.
Alana's so spot on. I can say like as an individual contributor, type A personality is like the devil is in the details. And I had to know like every single thing happening, going on, launching, article, meeting. And I totally bummed over a decade ago at this. But over time, you go through this journey of having a better understanding of making sure that you have the best talent in place, and then trusting that talent to execute effectively. And that allows you to lift yourself up over your business or your team and providing the straight strategy and guidance. And then over time, there are one of two managers or leaders that you can become, whether it be operational or people. And I've definitely leaned into the people management space because I love developing careers. I love removing roadblocks. But I think that was more because I got the feedback that I was being too into the weeds on the operational side. So that's where my powers lie, where the people management space.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that. I do want to really differentiate here the difference between being an actual people manager or a manager versus a leader. And as you all know, you're not required to manage people to be a leader at the company. So can some of you share a little bit more about how women can step into a leadership role or advance into being a leader in the company? And maybe Elise, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so definitely I agree with that philosophy that everyone is a leader in their own right, whether or not you're managing folks. And the things that I think about when I think about leadership and stepping into those roles are really starting with self-awareness, understanding your strengths, your skill set, and your values. And then really building vision, where do you want to go? What do you want to be stepping into? What sort of impact do you want to make? And then advocating for yourself and really sharing that, making that known to your manager, to the people around you of what sort of impact you want to have, where you want to be going, so that you can start to build out those sponsor relationships and people can really advocate for you, open up stretch opportunities, think about, what is the next high visibility project that I want to raise my hand for, and being aware of where imposter syndrome or confidence might be holding you back, saying I'm not quite ready yet, or I'm afraid, and really going out there, right? Giving yourself that boost of confidence, having the support system in place to say, people have my back, people fail all the time, and we learn from that, we grow from that, and really putting yourself out there, because we need more women in leadership. We need more women in leadership and technology, and every single one of you has so much to offer and add to this world and whatever space that you're in right now. So it's like, go for it. Self-awareness, vision, advocacy, and stretch yourself.
That was perfect. Thank you so much, Elise. So we're running short on time here. I can't believe this panel kind of flew by before we knew it. So I'm just going to end with a couple last questions, and I'd love for each of you to kind of take the time in finishing out this panel. Either what is your biggest piece of advice for women that want to work in tech? And as well as what tactical steps and actions do you want to see in changing the narrative for women in tech? And you can answer both questions or one of them, but just ending kind of your thoughts on this panel with our audience here today. And anyone can start.
I guess I can start. One of the things, I'll answer the latter, Janine. Technology companies develop some of the most diverse products and services for a very diverse world. Although when we sit in the conference rooms or on video conferences, you don't see that diversity. So I'm very, very much of an advocate around diversity, equity, and inclusion in this space, and creating the idea that women of color, women of different ethnicities can do just as well in the technology space. And so that's why I'm leaning in around what things can be changed, more diversity.
And I can go second. I think with that, I'd like to say that I wish more women would consider technology, because we need your voice to shape our products, to be able to do better out there. And the quote that I also want to say is, even when your voice shakes, speak. Because I've had many situations where I felt really scared, but I still said something and it was impactful. So to all my women out there, speak.
I'll share. I'd say for women, lift as you climb, as you grow and advance in your career. Let's be locking arms with others and thinking who else we can pull up with us to really support this growing ecosystem. And for companies, we really need to be taking seriously with clear goals that are ambitious, transparency, measuring progress, and moving the needle forward. This is not about a problem with women or women needing to be fixed or developed more. This is about an industry opening up doors that have previously been closed to women and people of color and truly taking that seriously. So I'm excited about the direction we have to go ahead.
And I would just add that I would love to see us shift the stories that we share. Often we tell stories about women who made it to the tippy top, or very technical women. And I think we've just got so many different roles, so many different backgrounds, so many different people who are thriving in tech. And I just want to see us make sure to tell the stories across so that if you're in high school and trying to decide, could you belong in tech, you would see examples, you would hear those stories that would inspire you, because there are so many women, not just on this call, but outside of this call, to be inspired by. And if you're one of those women, my advice to you is just ask. Because I wish there's so many times, and none that I think like were crazy and ruined my career, but just so many moments where I didn't realize that I could ask for something, that I could ask for what I wanted, ask for what I needed. And I think we are still raising awareness. And if people aren't mind readers, if they don't know you're interested in that job, if they don't know you're thinking about growth that way, they just don't know. And so just ask. That's my advice.
Amazing. Thank you so much to all of our panelists for your time. Let's give them a virtual round of applause. So thank you to Alana, Elise, Julissa, and Syreea. And thank you so much for letting me moderate your panel. It was an honor. I hope all of you that tuned in had the motivation and the courage to create, which is our theme for this conference. And I thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Next up, you can stay on this track for Lauren Hasson, who will share steps you can take to start building your value and put your tech education to work for you. Or switch to the second track for a session on hands-on learning with Google Cloud and many more.
Happy International Women's Day. I am so excited to be here with you, celebrating with tens of thousands of women in tech from across the globe. And I gotta tell you, I am absolutely pinching myself that I've been asked to share my story, to speak with all of you. It is such an honor to be here. But I'm pinching myself because if you had told me 9 years ago that I'd be here today speaking to all of you, I would not have believed you, because 9 years ago, I was at the absolute end of my rope. I had just been laid off from one of the worst dead-end jobs that I had ever had. And I was absolutely defeated. Absolutely defeated. Have you ever been there where you're just absolutely defeated? Because that was me. To make matters worse, I had zero marketable tech skills. I had zero network, and I had zero job prospects. And even worse, I had zero money in my bank account. My credit cards were almost maxed out, and I was relying on tiny unemployment checks just to make ends meet. It was a bad, bad situation. And I was absolutely terrified at the time. I was terrified I'd never find someone to hire me and give me a shot. And I was terrified that I'd never be able to take care of myself again. And when I wasn't pounding the pavement looking for a lifetime, any job to pay the bills, I was on my couch ugly crying. Have you ever been there ugly crying? That was me. It was not a pretty situation. So I took whatever money I had left on my credit cards and I threw myself a Hail Mary, and I hired myself a career coach because I was stuck and I knew I needed help to get unstuck, and I needed an outside perspective to help me figure out what to do next. And she had me take a career assessment to figure out what I should be doing. And the results of the career assessment completely surprised me. They overwhelmingly said I should be developing software. And you see, that came as a complete shock to me because I thought that door had already closed. You see, I have an undergraduate degree in computer science, but after some less than stellar college internships, I had completely left tech behind and gone a completely different direction. I am an attrition number right out of school. And here I was being told that I should be developing software and put my degree to work. And you may think this is great news. I had the computer science degree, but my tech skills were over 7 years outdated, which is like an eternity in tech. My skills were archaic. I was archaic. And to put this in perspective, when I graduated, not only did the iPhone not exist, the Razor didn't even exist, and SMS text messaging wasn't even a thing yet. That's how outdated my tech skills were. And I remember thinking, how in the world am I ever going to relearn my tech skills and get back into tech, much less convince someone to hire me? But I also knew it was my best chance. It was my only hope. And so I took action. And I enrolled myself in an evening community college course to slowly relearn my tech skills. And while I was relearning my tech skills and studying at night, I was pounding the pavement during the day, cold calling every company and agency and tech company I could find, looking to get my foot, just get it in the door. And I got to tell you, this was hard. This was grueling. I got turned down and flat out ghosted more times than I can count. In fact, I only got one yes. And it wasn't even that great of a yes. It was for an internship level role. internship level role to come in, teach myself iOS. And I only had 90 days to prove myself, to convince them to keep me on. And now I was even more terrified. I was terrified I would come in, lay it all on the line, give it everything I had. And then that wouldn't be enough. And then not only would I be back at square one, but I'd be even worse off and even more defeated. But I also knew if I didn't put myself out there, if I didn't give myself the chance to succeed, I would likely always be wondering, what if? So I took that leap of faith. I put myself out there. And in less than 2 years, I not only managed to survive that 90-day trial period and keep that job, but I had managed to absolutely thrive. I had been one of a handful of iOS developers worldwide who'd worked on some of the first iPad apps for major television networks to bring TV shows and TV movies to your iPad, which was brand new technology 9 years ago. I'd played a leadership role in getting content on your TV to sync in real time with content on your iPad for a major television network's 25th anniversary special, which was groundbreaking, bleeding edge technology. We were the first developers to be doing this at the time. And I had reached top of field for iOS developers. I had reached iOS Mecca. My app was one of only 27 apps that was featured in Apple's iOS 7 groundbreaking keynote as a launch partner. And that's my app next to Facebook and Twitter and PayPal. And with everything that I was doing, my hard work had not gone unnoticed. I had won the company-wide award, not once, not twice, but 4 times at this international agency in just 2 years. And I wasn't just hitting it out of the park at work. I was also really active in the tech community and in the hackathon community. And I had been invited to, and I had won a number of really high profile hackathons, including winning the International South by Hackathon 2 years in a row. And then I got the invitation of a lifetime. I was one of 100 tech innovators worldwide. They invited the likes of Craig Newmark, the founder of Craigslist, Kay Koplops, the founder of USA Television Networks, and then me to fly on a private 747 jet from San Francisco to London to attend the UKJ Innovation Conference to present ideas to the United Nations. And with everything that I had done at the company, everything that I was doing in the community, my company's executive leadership had taken notice, and they came to me and they asked me to head up the company's innovation and culture committee. And it wasn't just my own company's executive leadership that had taken notice. I was regularly getting recruited by top tech companies. Google, Apple, Facebook were regularly calling me, trying to woo me away from my company to come work for them. In just 2 years, I had gone from absolute rock bottom, absolutely zero marketable tech skills, 0 network, 0 job prospects, 0 money in my bank account, to a top, highly recruited woman in tech with awards behind her name. And I had nearly quintupled my salary. And now today, I am living out how I define success. By day, I work remotely from my home in Dallas for a Silicon Valley payments company, where I am one of the most senior engineers, and I'm the architect of our entire voice payment system and all of our messaging capabilities. And I've owned all of application security for a payments company where application security really matters. And I'm also the founder of the DevelopHer platform. I help women in tech just like you get ahead, stand out, and earn more in their careers. And what I learned through all of this is that it's not some quantum leap that's going to help you get ahead. Someone's not going to come along and tap you on the shoulder and make some giant leap. Instead, it's the small actions taken consistently and repeatedly that compound over time and yield incredible results that help you get ahead to stand out and really transform your career. And that's what I'm going to share with you today. I'm going to share with you the 5 simple things that I did consistently and repeatedly in my own career to get ahead, to stand out, and to earn more so that you too can leave today with immediate actions that you can take to build your own best career, to get ahead, to stand out, and finally earn what you're worth. Now, first and foremost, the conversation starts today, but it does not end. And I want each and every one of you to be connected with me. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Follow me on Twitter. The conversation starts today, but let's stay connected because we're all women in tech together. And the second thing is, this is a social-friendly presentation. Be taking pictures, sharing out what resonates with you. In the bottom left-hand corner of every slide are my handles and hashtags for the event. Share out with the world what you're doing, what you're learning, and tell them what you're taking away from today's presentation. Now, the first and most important thing that I did to get ahead, to transform my career, is I took action. I took action over and over again. And when I say I took action, I mean I stepped up, I showed up, and I asked, even when it terrified me and even when I doubted myself. I took action. One of the highlights of my career was when I was invited to attend the UKG Innovation Conference. I mean, I'm pinching myself to this day that I still got this incredible invitation to go and present to the United Nations. But the most incredible part of this opportunity to me is that anyone I worked with at the time, honestly, they were more qualified and talented than me, could have also had this incredible invite. But they didn't step up, show up, and ask over and over again like I did. And that's why I got the invite. You see, I can trace this incredible invitation back to just 2 months into that new engineering job I had. And the head of engineering pulled our entire department aside and asked all of us to volunteer an entire Saturday. Yeah, volunteer an entire Saturday to mentor at a local hackathon. As you might guess, only a couple of us volunteered and said we would step up and do it, and I was one of them. And I still remember to this day sitting outside the Innovation Center before 8 a.m. on a Saturday morning in my car, silently praying to myself that I didn't make a fool of myself. I was that nervous. But I stepped out despite my fear. I went in. And I discovered, yeah, there were a lot of people who knew more than me, but I found the small areas where I did know knowledge and where I could contribute. And that's where I added value. And while I was there, I made it a point to meet the organizer. And the organizer invited me and all of my fellow mentors to continue to attend his events. But only I showed up. And I didn't just show up once. I showed up over and over again. So when the same organizer announced several months later that he was hosting a high-profile hackathon at the International South by Conference in Austin, and to even get your foot in the door to this hackathon, you had to have one of the event's $1,500 conference tickets, which I guarantee you I did not have at the time. I took action. I called up the conference organizer, the event organizer, and I pitched myself to him as a right-hand volunteer. And I ended up not only getting my foot in the door to the event, I got to work at the door of the event where I got to meet every single high-profile and important person who was attending. Then something happened literally overnight on the first day. One of the hackathon teams needed an additional team member, an engineer. And at 11 p.m. that night, I went from volunteer to engineer because I was an engineer. And we ended up winning at that hackathon. So when 1 year later, the same organizer announced he was hosting an even higher profile hackathon, this time in tandem with American Airlines, which was promoting their international high profile rebrand of the company. And this time, the event was invite only. I got an invite. I not only got an invite, I got to bring my very own team to the event. And while we were there, we met a guy from American Airlines who wasn't part of the hackathon. And he followed up with us after we had won at the hackathon, but only I replied to his email. And I didn't just reply to his email, I cultivated that relationship. So when a couple months later, British Airways announced they were hosting an innovation hackathon in the sky event that was invite only for top innovators worldwide. I mean, a who's who list of people in tech. And American Airlines got to invite 5 people. I got one of those invites. I'll tell you, I didn't do anything special other than step up, show up, and ask over and over again. And it led to an incredible invite. And it's something that you can do too, starting today. Now, the second thing I did to really get ahead, to build my value and cement myself as a valuable asset, was I built my network before I needed it. And I did this because I had learned a painful lesson early in my career that it's not enough to do good work to get ahead. But people who influence your career, they need to know you, and they need to know the work, the good work that you do in order to advance your career. And I was fortunate enough to learn this lesson just 1 year out of college. And at the time, I wasn't even in tech. I was an investment banker. And investment banks have all their employees in analyst class. And at the end of the year, they take all the analysts and they rank them into tiers for the analyst class. And the tier that you're ranked in out of 5 determines your year-end bonus. And the tiers have a difference of tens of thousands of dollars. So the tier you're ranked in really matters. And I went into my performance review and I heard nothing but great things. But I was ranked in the second to top tier. And so I asked a question that changed my life forever. I asked them, well, what held me back? And they said, Lauren, you're great at what you do. You're in a branch office here in Silicon Valley, and everyone here in the office knows you and the work that you do. But not enough people in our New York City headquarters who have influence over your career know you and know the great work that you do. Right then and there, I learned one of the most powerful lessons in my career. I learned that it's not enough to do great work to get ahead, but people who influence your career, people who have power over your career, they need to know you and they need to know the work that you do. So day one, getting back into tech, I made it my goal, my priority to build my network before I needed it. I started by building my internal network. I made it my goal to meet everyone at the company that I could possibly meet and get to know them. I joined committees to meet people across disciplines and across different job levels. I went to meetups. I went to happy hours. I went to breakfast. I even went so far as to join the new hire welcome committee. That way I could meet everyone as they walked in the front door. And it paid off. Within a year, not only did I know everyone at the company, but everyone at the company knew me and they knew the work that I did. And when someone I worked with had something they needed solved cross-company, they came to me because they knew that I knew the people to help them solve their problems. And it wasn't just my colleagues who were coming to me to help them solve their problems. It was executive leadership too. When they had some important initiative they needed to roll out and get buy-in across the company, they came to me because they knew I had the network and they knew I had the influence to help them roll out their most important initiatives. When you have the network, when you have the influence to solve problems for other people, you immediately become an asset and you become more valuable to your network and in your own career. But I wasn't just building my internal network. At the same time, I was also building my external network. And I was going to every conference, every meetup, hackathons, you name it. If there wasn't an external event out in the community, I was finding a way to attend that. And I got to tell you, this was actually really hard and a stretch for me because I'm an introvert. You may not guess it because I'm speaking here today, but I am so naturally shy. So this was something that was completely out of my comfort zone. But I got it done. And here's how I did it. I made myself micro commitments. I didn't try to build an entire big network overnight. Instead, I took it one small step, one small micro commitment at a time. And I'd start by making 3 small micro commitments to myself that I couldn't not do. They were so small. I said, Lauren, pick an event. Pick one event and commit to showing up to the event. Then while you're there, you don't even have to stay the whole time. You just have to stay long enough to meet 3 new people. I'd meet those 3 people. Sometimes I'd stay longer, but a lot of times I'd hightail it out. And then I had to promise myself to show up one more time. And I did this over and over again. And I built my confidence. And every time I got more and more confident. And I'd start by meeting some new people. And then I started recognizing people that I had met before at events. And then something else happened. People started recognizing me and coming up to me. And what I discovered is I wasn't the only person who was nervous that I'd be standing by myself in a corner. Other people were just as nervous. And when they recognized me, they would come up to me. And then it got to a point where I couldn't even walk in the front door of an event without someone recognizing me and coming up to talk to me. And now I not only have an amazing local network, but I have an incredible global network. And I'll be the first to tell you that I am not the fastest, I'm not the fanciest, I'm not the most talented software engineer, but I am one of the most networked. And when someone in my network has a problem, they come to me because I am top of mind, because they know me and they know the work that I do. And they know that if I can't immediately solve their problem, I can get them connected to someone who can. When you become the person in your network who solves other people's problem, you immediately become an asset and you become incredibly valuable to your company and to your internal and external network as well. Now, the third thing that I did to exponentially grow my value was I was constantly learning new and valuable skills, and I was building my portfolio to show that I had those skills. And I was doing this because I learned one of the fastest ways to accelerate my career growth was to figure out what skills every company valued and really wanted to hire for, and where that overlapped with where there wasn't a lot of talent in the marketplace that had those skill sets. I would find where they intersect. I'd go learn those new skills, and then I'd show that I had those skills. And 9 years ago, I learned iOS. iOS was brand new technology at the time. Every company was looking to hire an iOS developer, and not a lot of people had those skill sets. They only had a couple of years of experience, and there weren't a lot of people with these skill sets. And the operative words here are taught myself. I didn't wait for someone to tap me on the shoulder and show me the ropes and come up and teach me how to do iOS. I went out and I got the experience for myself. I read books. I did video tutorials. I picked up bugs that no one wanted to work on. I volunteered for projects that no one wanted to touch with the 10-foot pole because I was eager to put my new skills to work and show people what I could do. And I got to be honest, at first, these opportunities did not come to me. They did not just easily present themselves. But I did not let that stop me. When opportunities did not come for me, I went out and I created the opportunities for myself. And for me, I did this through hackathons. There are a number of other ways that you can also do this for yourself. But for me, one of the most powerful ways that I used was hackathons. And I did that because it killed multiple birds with one stone. They were time bound. They had something to show in my portfolio at the end of it. I met new people, and it was expected that you were testing out new skills. So it checked a lot of the boxes for me. And what I did is I used every bug. I used every hackathon, every new project to level up, to get to a next level, to get to a bigger project. And it paid off. That's how I ended up featured in Apple's iOS keynote, working on some of the biggest projects out there at the time. And 9 years ago, I started by learning iOS, and I invested in learning these new and valuable skills. But this is something that I continue to do to this day. In fact, 3-4 years ago, I looked around and I said, it's time to level up again. I was top of field. And I said, it's time to level up again and find new and valuable skills that make me marketable, that make me a linchpin, that make me really valuable and stand out from the crowd. And for me, I retooled not once, but twice. I retooled into security and I retooled into voice and backend. And I got to tell you, it was hard. It was hard to start over and learn a new skill set and not be good at something, especially when you were top of field. But it was absolutely worth it. Because I invested in learning new and valuable skills, emerging skill sets, I not only became incredibly valuable to my company and filled a direct hurting need that they had at the time and filled a hole that they had, but I became incredibly valuable and marketable as a woman in tech in the marketplace. I am constantly receiving incredibly lucrative offers because I have such a unique skill set and valuable skill set. Now, the good news for you is that you don't just have to get into security. There are a number of different opportunities for you to also get ahead. And my advice to you is this: don't pick a technology that people can have 20 years of experience in, that it's been around for a long time. Instead, figure out what I call is the quote, front of the line. Figure out new technologies that haven't been around very long, that lots of employers are interested in hiring people for, that not a lot of people have those skill sets. Learn those skills, and then you essentially jump to the front of the line. You can bypass people who have years of experience because you're learning the new and valuable skill sets. You don't have to have 10 years of experience. You have to have just experience to show that you can do it. And when you jump to the front of the line, do one more thing. And that's keep what I call an Attagirl journal. And I'll give you information later in this presentation how you can get your own hands on a free developer Attagirl journal. And what I do is, this is something that I use personally for myself to do two things. Number one, I track everything that I've worked on, what I've done, the accomplishments, what went into it, how I was feeling at the time. Was this hard for me? Did it feel like a stretch, a challenge? Did I have overwhelming feelings of imposter syndrome? I use it to be able to update my resume, to talk about myself in interviews. I use it to update LinkedIn. And I also use it to reflect on my progress. I'll come back quarterly and annually and review what I've done. And what I'll see is over time, I've forgotten how much I've grown, and things that were once challenging for me are now natural and easy to do. And that's called growth. And that helps me build my confidence. And so oftentimes we as women in tech are too hard on ourselves and don't give ourselves credit for how far we've come. And so I'll use that to build my confidence, to strengthen that confidence muscle. And I'll also use it to do one more thing, and that's communicate my value and talk about the value that I provide through what I've done. And I learned the powerful lesson that it's not enough to do good work to get ahead. This is not something you leave to chance. You cannot do good work in a silo and expect someone to come around and take notice and tap you on the shoulder and pull you up. You cannot do that. You have to be your own best advocate to get ahead and to stand out. And for me, I had to become my own best advocate. And I at first I thought it was going to take being icky and self-promotional, which didn't feel natural to me. So I found a way that's really authentic and genuine to me, and it's really simple. And it's something that I bet you're already doing that you can put to power as well. And what I do is, when I would finish a project at work, or if I went to a hackathon, or if I went to a conference, even if I read a new book, if I learned something new, I would take lots of pictures. I would take pictures with the people that I met, things that I worked on, interesting sessions that I attend, just like maybe attending sessions at this event. I'd take a lot of pictures. Then at the end, I would select one picture, and I would post it with a simple tagline with the right hashtags and handles and tag the right people. And I would post it not in one, but in 2 places. The first place I would post it would be to my external network. For me, that's posting to LinkedIn and maybe Twitter and Facebook, because I want my external network to know about the work that I'm doing. I want my external network to see what I'm up to, what I'm learning, what I'm involved with. The second place you might not have thought about, those equally as important for you to post to, is my internal network. I post, for me, it's on my company Slack. It might be a Microsoft product for you, whatever your company uses to communicate out what people are doing internally. I would post to the internal message board. In fact, posting a simple picture with a caption at my current company to our internal Slack is exactly how I got my foot in the door in security and got a new valuable skill set. But there's no magic in one single post. One single post to LinkedIn or Twitter or Slack is not going to change your life. The magic kicks in when you do it over and over again. When your network, when your colleagues, when your external network see you involved in the same types of projects, the same types of events, contributing to the same types of thought leadership, when they see that over and over again, something magical happens. You build yourself a reputation. And I didn't just build myself a reputation, one reputation. I built myself multiple reputations, and I'm continuing to build those reputations to this day. At first, I built myself a reputation as an expert in iOS. Then I built myself a reputation as someone who competes in and wins high-profile hackathons. Then I built myself a reputation as someone who's really active in the tech community. And then as a security and women in security expert, then as a speaker, then as an expert in voice. And now as a speaker and advocate for women in tech, I'm still building reputations to this day. And it doesn't take being icky and self-promotional. I've done it in a way that's authentic and it's genuine to me. And I post no more on average than once a week at the most. And when I first started out, I was only posting once a month. It's something incredibly simple that you can do. You're likely already doing it. And the power kicks in when you do it over and over again. Now, the last and most powerful thing that I did to transform my career was I invested in myself. I invested in myself. I invested in my career, and I invested in my future and my family's future. And I invested in myself because I see and view myself as an asset, something that if I invest in, I can grow my value and yield dividends. And my first investment was investing in a career coach because I was stuck. Not only was stuck, but I knew I needed an outside perspective to help come in and get me unstuck. And that's what she did. She helped me get clarity on what I should be doing next. And she helped me accelerate my progress to getting back into tech. My only regret is that I didn't do this sooner. I maxed out credit cards to make this happen. It terrified me. But my only regret in hindsight is that I did not invest in myself sooner. My second investment was enrolling myself in an evening community college course. This may seem like a small investment to relearn my tech skills at night, but it paid off big time because when I was interviewing at tech companies, I wasn't just talking about getting back into tech. I was actually backing it up with my time and money, and I was actually doing it. And when I got my foot in the door, I didn't stop there. In fact, I doubled down and I invested in myself even more. If there was a book or a training video that I needed to advance my career and up level, and my company didn't get it for me, I went out and I got it for myself. If there was an event, an industry event I needed to attend to sharpen my skills or build my network, I found a way to get my foot in the door. If there was a mentor that I needed to help me get to the next level, I didn't wait for someone to come alongside me and tap me on the shoulder. I went out and I hired those coaches for myself to get to the next level. And because I invested in myself, people who were once my mentors are now coming to me today for advice. The tables have completely turned. And this isn't something that I did to just accelerate my career to getting back into tech. This is something that I have continued to do all along for the last 9 years. And it's something I continue to do and to prioritize to this day. I invest in multiple professional coaches because I know the value of having someone who's achieved what I want to achieve come alongside me, show me the ropes, short circuit the learning process, and give me outside perspective. I'm a member of multiple membership communities because I know the value of being surrounded with like-minded individuals who have the same aspirations, who are on the same journey, have similar goals. I regularly attend industry events to sharpen my skills, to up-level, to learn new things, and to meet other people. And then I'm going to share something that a lot of people might not talk about, but I think is absolutely critical. I invest in professional counseling because I know that if I don't take care of myself and my mental health first, I cannot even begin to think about taking care of my career. You may be looking at this and being like, Lauren, this is a lot. And I'll tell you, it is. I've invested thousands of dollars in myself, not all at once, but over the course of 9 years, I've invested a lot in myself. And I'll tell you, to this day, every single time I make an investment in myself, I have a moment where I catch my breath because it scares me. But my biggest regret is what my life would look like if I didn't invest in myself. I see myself as an investment. And I look back and it terrifies me to think what my life would look like if I had not invested in myself. Because I stepped out despite my fear, invested in myself, I went from absolute rock bottom 9 years ago, 0 marketable tech skills, 0 job prospects, 0 network, and 0 in my bank account, to a top highly recruited, award-winning woman in tech with global connections, and I have more than quintupled my base salary. If that is not a return on investment, I don't know what is. Now, I've shared some incredibly personal stories with you today. I've shared what it was like to be at rock bottom, ugly crying on my couch. And I've really peeled back that curtain and I've let you have an inside look on what it really took behind the scenes to build my career and transform it in such a short amount of time. And I did that to inspire you, not to impress you, but to inspire you and show you what's possible. But I know that there are a few of you out there who are going, Lauren, it's great that you can do it, but can I really do it too? And I got to tell you, I have worked and transformed lives of thousands of women in tech worldwide, men too. And because there are a few of you who may need a little more convincing, I want to brag about the women in tech who've sat in this event exactly like you over the last 3 years. Recognize that if I can do it, they can do it too, and put the tenets of the framework to work. Santhi attended an event just like this at her company, an international computer maker, just 2 years ago. She's a solutions architect. She was doing fine in her career at the time, but she recognized she could be doing more. When she heard about taking action and stepping up, she recognized that she needed to do that. That day, she went up to her senior vice president at the event and told him that she wanted to pursue a career in leadership at the company. The next thing you know, she's part of the company's worldwide emerging leaders program. They competed in teams within the program and her team won. So not only did they win out of top performers, but their project got integrated into the company's customer experience service line. She got trained as a global ambassador for the company, and she's also a mentor to local girls as part of a women's network in her town. But Santhi's story doesn't just end with her. Her husband saw the results she was getting by just simply taking action. and stepping up and owning her outcome, that he decided to pursue a stretch job promotion that he had been avoiding, and he got it. So taking action not only changed Santi's life, but it changed her husband's life as well. Lynn had been out of the workforce for a number of years. Not only that, but she had just moved to a new town. And she was really nervous about getting back into tech, and she didn't know how she was going to do it. But she recognized the power of building her network before she needed it. So she started attending local women's groups. And one of the women's groups said there was going to be a hackathon to participate in that was virtual. And she was nervous at first to participate in the hackathon because her skills were a little bit out of date. But she remembered, just show up. So she did. And she was on a team with women internationally. And she discovered that she actually knew more some of the other women. She was teaching them. And then their team ended up winning 7th place in an international hackathon. And now she's putting to action and putting herself out there. And she's really owned her space as a business developer, a business intelligence developer, and has the confidence to go out and get the job that she was afraid to even apply for before. Linda saw me speak at a Google event just like this one a year and a half ago. And she had a light bulb moment when I talked about learning new and valuable skills and jumping to the front of the line. And that day, she decided that she was going to pursue getting her certification in Google Cloud Architecture. And then one of her friends called her up and said, hey, we have a Google Cloud project that we're working on. I'd love you to be part of the team. And she almost didn't join because she was so nervous, but then she remembered to build your portfolio before you're ready and to start showing that you had those skills. And once she joined the team, she discovered that she actually knew more than other people and was helping them learn. And on top of that, she got paid to learn. And now she is taking the Google Cloud Architecture exam in her 3rd language and is really excited about her future because she has opportunities, because she learned front of the line technologies. When I met Barbara 3 years ago, she had just been laid off from a dead-end job. She had been demoted in part of the Great Recession and hadn't seen a raise since then, and she was absolutely defeated. She hadn't known how to talk about her value, to articulate how she could help a company. And so she recognized the value of learning to talk about herself, building herself as a brand. And so she started networking and telling her friends and her family and practicing with them. And not only did she land a great job and negotiate a great salary with a company that values her, because she did such a great job when she got in the door that they even expanded her role to give her even more responsibility that are right in line with her wheelhouse and her skill set. And lastly, Tracy. Tracy has this incredible transformation story. Tracy heard me speak a number of years ago, and at the time she was 55. She had been on mental disability for 18 years. She was living at home with her parents in rural Oklahoma. And she said, her own words, she was lucky to be bagging groceries at Walgreens. But she recognized that if I could do it, she could do it too. So she started attending women in tech networking events, started slowly relearning her tech skills through online sites. And then she told people about what she could add value and what kind of job she's looking for. A year and a half later, Tracy has been working at a nonprofit in Houston, living on her own, holding her own on a team of all men as a technical project manager. And not only that, but Tracy said in a developer membership call just a month ago, she goes, Lauren, I figured out that I can figure it out. And to me, that was her saying, I now have confidence in myself. Tracy completely transformed her life. Now I've peeled back the curtain and I've showed you what it really takes. The 5 simple things that I did that all these women did too, to get ahead, stand out, and earn more in your career. The first thing you need to do is you need to take action, step up, show up, ask, even when it terrifies you. And even when you doubt yourself, take action. The second thing you need to do is build your network before you need it. Figure out who you know, Who should you know? Then go start building those networks, internal and external, one connection at a time. Third thing is constantly learn new and valuable skills. Figure out where is the front of the line. What skill sets does your employer need? Does the market need? That there aren't a lot of people who have those skills. Go get those skills and build your portfolio. And when you build your portfolio, don't do work in a silo and expect people to notice. Tell people about those skills. Be proud to show off the work that you're doing, the expertise that you're building, and the impact that you're having. And the fifth and most powerful thing to do is invest in yourself. Invest in yourself, invest in your career, and invest in the life that you want for yourself and your family. Now, if you want to go to the next level, I have a free gift for you. I talked about the power of the DevelopHer Atta Girl Journal to track your accomplishments, to track your progress, to build your confidence over time. And it's my free gift to you. Go to developher.com/journal. Download the free PDF interactive journal that will help you track and catalog your accomplishments, give you guided reflections so that you can reflect on your accomplishments. This will help you build your resume, build your LinkedIn profile, talk about yourself in performance reviews and in interviews, and really help you build and track your confidence over time. And if you want to go further, if you want to dive even deeper into all the 5 steps, I wrote a book and I'm excited to share. It launched this last Monday on International Women's Day. It's based on everything that I just talked about, and it is a bestseller in 11 top tech, engineering, UX, and design categories. It's available on Amazon in both Kindle and paperback and has so many 5-star reviews that I would love for you to go out and dive in. And this is some of my best work in print format that you can dive in and immediately start applying in your own life. And it's my hope that I'll be back next year celebrating another year of International Women's Day. And I won't just be sharing my story. I won't be sharing Linda's and Santi's and Barbara's story, but I'll be sharing your story. Because you today said, I'm worth it. You took action. You stepped up. You started building your network, communicating your value, building your value, and investing in yourself. And you started the journey to own your own success story. Thank you and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Lauren, for sharing your story and expertise. Now, it's time to stretch. Let's welcome our instructor who will be guiding us with some moves during this break. Enjoy them.
Welcome to the International Women's Day Summit 2021. My name is Coach Annie, here to lead your movement break. In our session today, we'll be breathing, moving, and thinking intentionally to kickstart our minds and bodies for today's focus. No matter where you are in your fitness journey, be proud of yourself for being willing to participate and dive into some movement with me. The intention of this session is to invite some blood flow and movement to our neck, our shoulders, our spine, and even our hips. And of course, taking a nice little break from our desk or wherever you've been doing work this past year. I like to start each session with a theme. So today the theme is the power of human connection. There's links between connecting with others, whether it's talking on the phone or online, however you connect with others in longevity of life. So whenever you're feeling love or empathy or connection, that's when there's this chemical in our brain that's released called oxytocin that reduces inflammation and actually boosts your mood. So without further ado, let's go ahead, connect a little bit, and get into our movement break. So joining me in a standing or seated position, however you're feeling this moment, we're going to start with some breathing. So putting one hand on your chest, one hand on your tummy. All right. Hands move together with the inhale and exhale. So really focusing on elongating that exhale. You can breathe with your mouth open or closed. Three more here. Relaxing those shoulders. All right, last one, longest exhale. All right, moving now to our neck. We're going to go into neck circles. So it doesn't matter which direction you start with, but dropping that same ear to that same shoulder, thinking about your head drawing a big circle in the sky. Body is just feeling weightless here. Relaxing that jaw. Go ahead and give me one more this direction. Big circle. All right, let's go ahead, go the other direction. Same thing. Drop that ear to that shoulder. Nice big circle. Taking your time. Noticing if there's any tight spots. Working around it. Last one here. All right, shake that out a little bit. We're going to move on to our shoulders now, going into shoulder circles. So starting forward, I want you to be real dramatic with it. Open up that chest as you roll those shoulders back and through. Big inhale, long exhale. Giving yourself a nice little massage here. Last one this direction. All right, let's balance that out. Go in reverse. Go back now. Open up that chest. Give me two more here. Whew, feels good. So moving on now to our spine. So I'm going to show this from the side. Starting from the standing position first, I'm going to tuck, roll. My knees are going to bend as I come down. I'm going to press my hand into my leg and open up to one side. Getting some rotation, take a deep breath here. Back to center and then switch to the other side. Not forcing anything here. All right, so if you're standing, continuing to do so. If you're seated, it's the same thing. You're pressing same hand or same arm into your leg and then opening up like a book. Getting some mobility in that middle part of our spine, which is where a lot of our movement comes from. Go ahead and give me one more each direction. Noticing with each rep, if you're able to get a little bit more rotation. All right, awesome. So moving on now to our hips, we're going to go into a hip shift. All right, so thinking, using your imagination, if you're standing, you're going to send your hips back like you're sitting in a chair. All right, so send one hip back. You're going to go ahead, reach for that foot, and then drive through the heel as you come back up. All right, so alternating side to side here. You're going to sync up your breath. Inhale down, exhale, back up. So if you're standing, continuing to do so. If you are seated, a little bit different here. You're going to shift, so one knee comes forward, the other knee comes back. You're going to reach for that opposite foot and then come back up and then switch to the other side. So opening up this back hip. All right, either you're standing or seated. Same thing here, mobilizing that hip a little bit. This is a great way, if you're going for a walk or a run and you're just feeling really tight in your hips, this is a great way to open up. All right, give yourself a little bit more mobility. Go ahead and give me one more each side. Last one here. All right, beautiful. Last thing we're gonna do for the day, some cactus arms. All right, so really opening up that chest, relaxing that neck just a little bit more. Meet me with your hands down to your sides. Give me a big inhale up. Grab those imaginary ropes and then exhale. Bring those fists to your shoulders. All right, give me 3 more here. Inhale up. Exhale down. Elongate that exhale. Bring it up. And down. Last one here. Inhale up. And exhale down. All right, awesome. Go ahead, make your way back to your seat or your desk. All right, I hope this movement break has your mind and body prepped. Let's go ahead, go down to our neck, going to some yeses, no's, and I don't knows. So starting off with some yeses here, going up and down, not forcing anything, just let your body feel weightless. Breathing it out. Go ahead and give me one more here. Let's go into some no's next. All right, again, going within your range of motion, not forcing anything. Noticing if one side's a little tighter than the other. You can always hold it and breathe into it. One more each side. All right, last piece here, I don't know. So dropping same ear to same shoulder, side to side here. Trying not to shrug up your shoulder, but meeting your head to your shoulder instead. Let's go do one more each side. All right, so if you're standing, keep going into those tuck and rolls. For those who are seated, it's the same idea, but if you want to keep your legs there to lead as some guidance for your chest, or if you want to bring your legs apart so you can go a little bit further down, that's up to you, but tucking, rolling, allowing those arms just to be weightless, and then roll back up here. Tuck and roll, one vertebrae at a time. Go ahead and give me 3 more here. Going at your own pace. All right, last one here. Whew, beautiful. So, few more moves here. Marches are next. So I'm going to show from standing first. All right, it's very similar for seated, but showing from the side, thinking pushing one foot into the ground, pulling with the other, bringing that knee up to hip level, and then coming back down. All right, for those of you who are seated, same idea here. Pushing through the ground, pulling the other knee up to hip level. All right, opposite arm, opposite leg here. Feeling that stretch in your hip flexor, especially as you come up and then lower back down. You can live here for a moment at the top if you'd like. Get a little extra stretch in. Go ahead and give me one more each side. Last one here. All right, beautiful. So last movement for the day, we're going to go into some cactus arms, opening up that chest a little bit, relaxing that neck even more. All right, so joining me with your hands to your sides, give me a big inhale up. Once those arms are up over your head, pretend you're pulling down imaginary ropes as you exhale. Long exhale. 3 more here. Inhale up. Exhale down. Bring it up again. And down. Last one here. Longest exhale. And down. All right, Awesome. Making your way back to your seats, all right, and back to your desks. I hope this movement break has your mind and body prepped to take on the day. Remember that you can use these moves daily whenever you just need to take a nice little break or just need to regain some focus and attention. If you like this and you're looking for more movement in your day, I invite you to check out go/HMP at home for all of your health and wellness needs. Thank you so much for coming in. I hope you enjoyed it just as much as I did. Have a great rest of your day. Bye for now.
All right. Hope you all had a good break. Now, how many of you here are designers? I'm really excited to hand it over to Janine Lee, who will be talking about diving into design thinking. Let's welcome her.
Hi, everyone. My name is Janine Lee, and I will be your speaker today for diving into design thinking. I am a global learning and development manager for the Google Data Center organization and also part-time adjunct faculty and doctoral candidate. So a little bit about me before I get started. I like to share this in what I call the river of life. You can do this exercise with your team, and basically you talk about kind of your journey and what brought you to where you are today. Typically for the river of life, you can have one side that talks about personal and one side that talks about professional and kind of showing where things intersect. But this is just kind of a high level overview that I'll start with today. So I was born and raised in Oakland, California. My parents are both immigrants to the United States. My mom is from Macau, my dad is from Hong Kong, and that's me in the bottom left corner that you see there, along with my little brother. I went to UC Davis for my undergrad, and I first started in the utility industry and actually pivoted to tech, which was kind of unheard of, actually. It's a very small percentage of folks that can move from energy and utility actually into the tech world. I had an emphasis and a focus on continuous improvement and process improvement, where a lot of design thinking principles were used in really brainstorming and solving complex problems. And then I did my part-time MBA at the Haas School of Business, where I'm now lecturing part-time in international business, leadership, and communications. And then also started teaching at the Berkeley Center of Executive Ed in digital transformation and leadership communications at Santa Clara University. Throughout this journey, coaching and leadership was always a passion of mine. So I also got my coaching certification at the Berkeley Executive Coaching Institute. And then now I'm pursuing my doctorate at USC in the School of Education of Ramirez. Design thinking is something that didn't originally come naturally to me. It's something that I had to learn over time, and I'm currently studying it in my doctorate and also launching innovation programs within my role at Google. But I'm very happy to be here today to share with you all what I know about design thinking. So what are we going to talk about today? I'm going to go over just briefly what is design thinking, what's the design thinking process, some best practices for enhancing your design thinking skills, and just a summary and ending of the presentation. So what is design thinking? Well, design thinking can be described as a discipline that uses the designer's sensibility and methods to match people's needs with what is technologically feasible and what a viable business strategy can convert into customer value and market opportunity. So this quote is from Tim Brown, who's the CEO of IDEO. And for those of you that aren't familiar with IDEO, it stands for the Innovation Design Engineering Organization, which is one of the top organizations in the world that focus on innovation. Ultimately, what I want to highlight here is that design thinking is a process that starts with the end user or the customer in mind. Essentially, what is the job to be done and what problem are you solving for the customer? And then looking at what is actually feasible and viable and aligned with your company's strategy to ultimately make this a value add for the customer and the market. So you'll hear me talk about design thinking and innovation interchangeably throughout this presentation. So innovation is really the end phenomenon when things are introduced to the world, but everything really starts with design thinking. And again, that's the specific approach that I'll talk about today to conceiving the ideas for innovation that ultimately move into the innovation process. So both of them use similar methods. They use similar mindsets, methods, and tools, but typically for innovation, we call it customer-centric, whereas in design thinking, we call it user-centric. And the difference really lies between the focus on the people. There is a very thin line between user versus customer, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Another clarification that I want to make is around invention versus innovation. Invention is essentially a new concept or a product. You can invent something and get a patent, which is really cool, but to take that to the next level and actually turn it into an innovation, will actually need you to be more customer-centric and to actually commercialize the invention. So here I have an example of a company called Ship. They started as an on-demand shipping company. Basically, they found the customer's needs to ship products. The users would take a picture of the object they want to ship through a smartphone app. And essentially, the courier would arrive and help pack these objects, box them up, and then ship them to whatever destination. It was a really great idea, and they were able to secure funding of up to $63 million. But ultimately, their profitability and their pricing model didn't work. So it wasn't a profitable business. The company decided to charge customers a $5 flat fee to basically collect and package the items that the customer might have. And that was really one of the major problems. So it didn't really make financial sense to charge $5 for everything, whether it was a small book or if it was a TV or a bicycle. And after a while, they realized that their pricing model wasn't going to work for them. And they changed the pricing model to range from $3 to $75. Ultimately, with their VC funding, there was a lot of pressure to expand, and they expanded too quickly, and the cost of operations was too high. So ultimately, the company wasn't able to sustain, and the CEO, Kevin Gibbons, said, you know, this business should exist. It ultimately should. Customers loved it. Small businesses loved it, but we didn't focus enough on the financial sustainability of the business from day one. So in this example, there was an inability to transform this from an invention to an idea, and they weren't able to meet the user's needs while making it profitable. So this is something that we need to continue keeping in mind as we go through design thinking and the differentiation between an invention versus an innovation. So now it's time for Mythbusters. All right, so who out there watches Mythbusters? I really like this show myself. We're gonna play a little game and think about some common myths regarding design thinking and innovation. And I'll be quoting myths from Explaining Creativity by Dr. Keith Sawyer, who's a psychologist and leading creativity researcher. So, first question, innovation is a skill that can be learned. True or false? So the answer is true. I think I talked about this in the beginning in my introduction. And I'll talk a little bit more about fixed mindset and growth mindset later, but it's definitely something that you can learn. It's not something that you're essentially born with. The second question, those who have no knowledge about an area are in the best place to create. So this is an interesting one. That is actually false. So most ideas actually come from people who are deeply familiar with the domain. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about T-shaped later on and how you can be deep in domain knowledge but have breadth of high-level knowledge. But this is essentially a myth. So if you're coming in as an outsider and coming up with a brilliant idea, that's great. However, to create the best creative ideas, those are the people that really have the deep domain experience that it requires. So the third question, creativity is best when you are alone. That is actually also false. So teamwork and collaboration is extremely critical to creativity. Ideas come in conversation, and creative people are connected to other experts and professionals. So you aren't expected to be a professional in everything or an expert in everything. And that's why teams and collaboration is so critical to creativity. All right, the fourth question. Creativity comes through a sudden burst of insight. So have you ever had that aha moment where you think you suddenly have a great idea? Well, that's also actually a myth. That is false. So scientists have actually discovered that creativity is mostly conscious hard work. So there are times when ideas may come suddenly, but for the most part, it's actually a conscious stream of thought and is intentional. And the last question, insights come during downtime. That is actually true. The power of pausing and getting to rest to actually connect your thoughts is so essential to creativity and design thinking. There was an article I read recently on innovation where the chief of staff of one of our former presidents actually set time aside for our president to think. And that was the most meaningful time to digest the day, make decisions. And ultimately, that is where the most brilliant, innovative ideas came from our former presidents. So if you got all 5 right, please raise your hand. And I know this is a virtual audience, so unfortunately, if we were in person, I would be giving you some type of swag because that's what we like to do at Google. But instead, if you got all 5 right, you can raise your hand and give yourself a nice pat on the back, and I'll give you a virtual high five. Great work for those of you that got those right. So moving on to the actual design thinking process itself, now that you know what design thinking is. So this framework was popularized by Stanford Design School, and it was originally based on what's called the scientific method. David Kelley, who's the co-founder of IDEO and the founder of Stanford Design School, actually introduced empathy into the scientific method. And then this is how the design thinking process was born. It was really created as a way to make the creative process repeatable and a systematic approach to solving problems. So there is this hyper focus on the user and truly empathizing with what the user is doing, how they're using a product. And I'm going to walk through each and every one of these steps. The cool thing about this process is it really works for any industry or product. So starting from left to right, the first phase is empathizing. So really understanding the human's needs. The second phase is defining. So reframing and defining the framework. The third one is ideating. So creating many ideas in ideation sessions. The fourth is prototyping. So how do you get a hands-on approach? And then the fifth is testing. So I'm going to be going into some more detail about each of the subsequent phases. So the first one is empathizing. And for those of you that are very familiar with empathizing, you know, empathy is our ability to see the world through other people's eyes, to really see what they see, feel what they feel, and experience things as they would. Of course, none of us can really, truly, fully experience things someone else does, but we can attempt to get as close as possible. So you can do this from a variety of different ways, and I'm going to go through them one by one. The first is being a good listener. Haven't you ever felt like you were going through a situation and you just said, I wish someone would just listen to me and they would understand how I'm feeling. I don't need somebody to give me advice. Well, that's extremely critical in step one, is to really listen to your end user, your customer. What are they feeling and what are they experiencing? The second one is to observe them. So instead of just listening to them, what do you see them doing? If you ever like to people watch, this is most certainly the best opportunity to do that. So if you go into a store, for example, and you see how an end user interacts with a product or what they're ordering on the menu, from those insights, you can really help understand and empathize what the customer wants and what the customer needs. The third thing you can do is questioning. So what do our customers need, and how do they do things today? And why do they need this? And what are they using today to solve the problem? There's all sorts of questions that you can ask. The one technique that I love leveraging the most is called 5 whys. So really peeling back the onion of why. So why did you purchase this product? Because my sister told me that it was a great product. Well, why did your sister think it was such a great product? So after asking 5 whys, you get really down to the root cause or the root question. And that is a technique that you can use as you're interacting with your customers, or even trying to better understand a problem or a solution that you're trying to solve. The fourth thing is conducting interviews. And again, leveraging the being a good listener, observing, and questioning are really critical in this. So really going out there, talking to your end customers, talking to your consumers, and figuring out what it is that they need. The fifth thing is creating user journey maps. So how can you understand what a customer is doing day to day? How do they spend their day when they get up till the end of the day? Or when they're shopping, what are their habits when they first go into the mall? Which store do they go to first? What do they have to do to stand in line? What do they have to do to check out? Those would all be things that you could potentially do to understand the user journey and what the user is going through. The last thing is called body storming, and that is the act of physically experiencing a situation in order to immerse oneself fully in the user's environment. So how might you do that? Or do you have examples in which you might have done that in the past? So once I was at a fair and I saw the organization MAD, which is the Mothers That Are Against Drunk Driving, and they had these goggles that you put on. And I remember putting them on, and it was literally the act of physically experiencing what it was like to be drunk. The goggles were so distorted, you couldn't walk straight, you couldn't pick anything up. And it really was body storming. It was really putting you in those users' shoes. But if, for example, you were targeting products towards specific user groups, those who are blind, those who can't hear, body storming would essentially put you into that persona and try to build inclusive products and try to understand what the user is going through. So that's step one, empathize, and some of the tools that you could use to go through this step. The second step is around defining. So I'm going to start with the quote that you see here. Upgrade your user, not your product. Don't build better cameras, build better photographers. That was stated by Kathy Syreea, who is a programming instructor and game designer. So what she's saying here is really critical. So what are people actually buying? So in the instance of a camera, they're not really buying a camera, they're buying a way to capture a photo or capture a memory. And if you were only thinking about building better cameras, you would miss out on this incredible opportunity in the market, which is that predominantly smartphones have replaced cameras, and they can do many things that cameras can do all in one. So a lot of times you really need to think about what is the job to be done, which is the JTBD. So when people buy drills, they're not buying a drill, they're buying a hole. So essentially, thinking about what it is that the job needs to be that's performed by the customer. That will help you kind of zone out in thinking about and defining the problem and what it is to be solved. So what is it exactly that the customer is solving? What are they trying to do with the product? And in some instances, it can be multiple things. From there, what I would do is actually draft your problem statement. It's extremely critical to actually write down what is the problem that's trying to be solved for the customer. And then step 3 would be to verify your problem. I can't emphasize how important it is to understand what the problem is that you're trying to solve. And who do you need to verify the problem with? Yeah, that's right. The user, the end user, the customer. And maybe your boss or your director when you're working in a corporate environment. But you just want to make sure you're solving the right problem, because a lot of people spend a lot of time going down a rabbit hole solving a problem that either doesn't exist or is actually the wrong problem for a customer. So that concludes step 2, define, and we'll move into step 3, ideate, which is the most fun part of this whole process. So creating many ideas in multiple sessions. How do we come up with the best ideas? And again, this is with the premise that you have the right problem statement and that you know what you're solving. So the first thing you can do is brainstorming. How might we? So for example, how might we create a faster way for customers to receive their packages? Well, Amazon has done that with Amazon Prime. It's efficient, it's fast, it's 2-day shipping. So how might we? You can ask that question amongst your team. You can ask that question as you're solving your problem and reflecting on your problem statement. The third thing is contradiction without compromise. So that is actually a slogan that's been my friend in thinking about creating the best solutions. So how do you think of something that is a contradiction without compromising? So the example I like to use is a 0-calorie cupcake that tastes good. So that sounds like a complete contradiction. How can you have a delicious cupcake that's 0 calories? but that is the contradiction without compromising. So if you can come up with an idea that really is this contradiction without compromising at all, you'll have the opportunity to come up with a phenomenal idea. And throughout all of this, your number one tool is really Post-its. So I cannot emphasize enough how Post-its are used for brainstorming. And I used to carry around a bag of Post-its and markers with me everywhere just to come up with ideas and put them together. And so rapid brainstorming, coming up with as many ideas as you can, good ideas as you can, using Post-its are generally encouraged. And then you can do what I call affinitize them. So group them together into themes, circle them, look at trends, and have a discussion. And I know that's much more challenging to do with your teams in this environment, but Google has a great tool that you could use called Jamboard. You could virtually use Post-its. You can post them around and have people build upon each other's ideas, and you can affinitize them and group them into bigger ideas as you go along. Some other techniques I've used is doing the opposite of the worst idea. I know that sounds a little confusing, but for example, if you were to fail at having the worst car ever, how might you do the opposite? So what would the worst car look like in the world? It's probably not very good looking. It's hard to park. So you'd have all that functionality laid out, and then your idea would be the opposite. So for example, if you don't want a car that's difficult to park, you would say, well, let's design a car that's super easy to park. And nowadays, someone has already ideated this, but we have those auto parking cars that auto parallel park. And how cool is that? You press a button and the car auto parks for you. So you can use this opposite of the worst idea for brainstorming. And then the last one is around building upon ideas. So again, brainstorming is best in teams, and design thinking and innovation works best in teams. So you could take a piece of paper, write down an idea, sit in a circle, pass the paper around, and build upon someone's idea. So again, focused on the same problem, someone may come up with one idea, passes it to you, and each person builds the idea to make it even better. I know that that's challenging, again, in a COVID environment, but you can do this in a spreadsheet. You could use a Jamboard, come up with specific ideas, and then call a rotation for those ideas and hand off those ideas to the next person. And I guarantee you, with any of these tactics, you'll come up with some amazing ideas. Moving on to step 4, prototyping. So prototyping is really adopting a hands-on approach. And it really, the goal is to make your ideas as real as possible. So let's say you have no budget. It's okay. I've categorized this from the least costly and least risky to the most costly or the most hands-on. So let's start with the story. You can create a story of your idea from the future. So what would the experience be like? You can write a newspaper article, or you can write just a story someone can read to say, imagine a world where you have XYZ product that you use that automatically helps you cook your dinner. And this is how it does it, this is how long it takes, and so forth. So it's kind of like a pitch, but it's really creating a story of how someone would use this product and how you would visualize it. And that helps you think about other aspects of this product or idea. The second area is an advertisement. So taking that a step further, if you were to then take this story into an advertisement, if you had some graphics, you promote your idea and you have fun with it, who would that advertisement appeal to? What customers? You could even spend the money to put this advertisement in a newspaper or online and see who reaches out and see how much people might enjoy this product. So it's a real world way to do this without having to actually create a product. The next one is a user journey or role play. So it's really thinking about acting out your idea. So trying out the role of the customer or the people in the situation and uncovering questions that they might ask you. So you could assemble simple props, uniforms, you could record it in this virtual environment, you could play multiple roles. But what would the customer do, for example, if they showed up at the store or if they were in line at the grocery market? how would they utilize this product, or how would this product shift around? So really looking into this role-playing user journey to really act out the experience. And if you're not able to do the role play, you could do an actual user journey that's drawn out with stick figures to say, this is the customer, this is where the customer would go, this is the journey that they would have in this experience. Which leads me to the next idea, which is a diagram or a process map. So you can map out the structure, the network, the journey, or the process of your idea. And you can try different versions. So diagrams can be especially helpful to share a service that you're imagining or a process that you're redoing, to really think through what would this look like. And it gives you flexibility to reconfigure and get feedback. Going a step further, you could create a mock-up. You can actually sketch out mock-ups of digital tools or apps or websites. You could simply do a sketch on a piece of paper and tape it to a computer screen or a mobile phone, and ask your friends, ask your end customers, if you were to see this app or you were to see this on a screen, what would you click? Where would you go next? All right, here's the next piece of paper. So it doesn't have to be super polished or super professional, but if you do have the budget, of course, doing actually a UX design and a UX session, and actually looking through prototype apps and seeing how users interface with a phone app or on a computer would be the next level of that. And then lastly, 3D models. So it could be a three-dimensional representation of your idea using cardboard, fabric, whatever it is, whatever you can find to really just show the size of the model, what the model might look like. And if you don't want to be so scrappy, you can actually hire someone to do a 3D printing of your model and actually look and touch and feel what your product might look like. So any of these ideas are viable for how you want to prototype, and everyone's going to do it differently depending on your risk level and budget that you might have. And lastly, testing. So developing your prototype or your solution and actually testing it with the end user. You want to know, did this solve your problem? The purpose is really to get feedback. And failures are okay, and I will talk more about failures later. But the key is to keep iterating and refining, and to going back to the prototype phase if you need, or going all the way back to ideate if what you created doesn't solve the problem. So again, even though it's a linear process with 5 steps, you go back into multiple phases as needed. So I would highly encourage you to test as much as you can and as much as you're comfortable with, get as much feedback, and be okay with failing or having to iterate and going back into time. And many of our famous inventors, many that have gone through the design thinking process, take a long time to go through and actually complete the last step, because they're really refining, coming up with a product that really meets the end user's needs. So lastly, we've gone through what is design thinking, what is the design thinking process, what are the best practices, or how can you become incredibly well-versed in design thinking? Well, I really love food, so I always have to do something with a food theme, and I do like spicy food. So I've come up with 4 different ways that you could, depending on your comfort level, begin to flex your design thinking mindset. So starting with mild and going to spicy, it depends on your spiciness level and your tolerance for spice. So I'll be referencing Professor Carol Dweck's Fixed Mindset and Growth Mindset article in this discussion. So I'll talk a little bit more about how to move from this fixed mindset to this growth mindset. So the first thing that you can do, and this is a mild spiciness, is to really build your discovery skills. And I'm referencing here The Innovator's DNA, which is one of the books that I'm reading in my doctorate. And it really makes innovators different if you're able to build out these skills. So starting on the left side, the first piece is the courage and the mindset. So are you, number one, willing to challenge the status quo and to take risks and, potentially fail? So many of you may say, yes, I want to change my mindset. I do have the courage. I definitely am into design thinking. That's why I'm watching this on a Saturday, and I'm really excited to hear about this topic. Great. We've checked the box on that. Then we'll move into the behavioral skills. So we talked about questioning, we talked about observing, and then moving into networking and experimenting. So how can you network, whether it be socially or connecting things together, associating different ideas, metaphors, how people are solving complex problems across other industries and how those apply to your industry. Those are all part of the cognitive skills. So taking the behavioral skills and moving it into this deep thought, the cognitive skills, and then moving into innovation. So those would all be skills that I would recommend in the mild spiciness range. And one of the things that you can leverage to remember the acronym for this is QONEA. So QONEA. Are you questioning? Are you observing? Are you networking? Are you experimenting? And are you associating? You'll want to make that as part of your regular language as much as possible as you're building out your discovery skills. The next step in your level of spiciness to progress from mild to medium is really to be T-shaped. So IDEO came up with this T-shaped philosophy, to be a T-shaped person. What does that mean? Well, we talked a lot about having deep subject matter expertise to be creative and to really think about a creative mindset. So that depth and knowledge can be anything. And so I would challenge you to think about, what is your deep expertise in? It's one knowledge area. Specifically, it could be something like design. It could be engineering. It could be communications. It can be something that you are known as an expert in. And that is something you have deep expertise in and would be incredibly innovative to create new ideas. The second thing is the other part of the T-shape, which is a base knowledge and skill. So thinking about not just depth, but thinking about a broad range across marketing, finance, legal, compliance. So having some high level visibility and understanding of your company or the product area or the industry that you're in. And again, this is really where the teamwork and collaboration plays such an important role, because you want to be able to leverage that network and get more depth from those who are T-shaped in that specific area. So if you want to up your spiciness level, think about what is the deep expertise that you have already or that you want to gain in a specific area, and how can you more broadly understand knowledge across different areas? That would be what T-shaped is. And now we're moving into a next level of spiciness. So this is the start of spicy. Forming a brain trust. So what is a brain trust? I'm referencing this from the book Creativity, Inc., who was co-authored by Edwin Catmull, who is the co-founder of Pixar. And there is one key mechanism that Pixar uses time and time again, and it's called the brain trust. So every few months there's a meeting and people get together and they talk openly about the progress of their movies. And the goal is very simple. It's to put smart and passionate people in a room, give them a problem, and encourage them to be honest and open with one another. So people feel obligated to be honest and are usually more open and genuine in the room, and they can express themselves openly. And so creating that climate to do that, and really there's no authority in the room. So everyone is supposed to be an equal in this meeting. But the main element is, of course, honesty, and that is the essence. So leveraging this benchmark from Pixar, who's one of the most creative companies in the world, you can form a brain trust with your team. And in fact, when Pixar and Disney merged, they formed another brain trust on the Disney side because it was so successful in Pixar. So I would challenge you to think about how you can create an environment with unfiltered criticism and honesty, and really broaden your perspective, bringing your ideas forward to your team, people you trust, in an environment that's safe to talk about the ideas, build upon them, and really take your ideas to the next level. And lastly, sharing your failures. This is the ultimate spiciness level. And this is really hard to do. I myself have a fear of failure, and so it's very hard for me to talk about failure. However, if you can really embrace your challenges and failures, this really takes your creative thinking to another level. The first thing you need to do is really embrace the challenges that come along. So we talked about the design thinking process and how you will be ideating and prototyping and testing with your customer, and oftentimes it'll fail. So when those things happen, how do you embrace that challenge? How do you pivot? How do you revise your idea? And how do you persist, right? There will be obstacles and setbacks in the design thinking process. And it's really up to you and your team to continue moving forward, to continue thinking ahead, learning from the criticism and adjusting. And ultimately, you really do want to build a culture, that fails fast. So how do you fail fast in an idea, learn something, get best practices, and move forward? That is something that's very challenging for companies to do and teams to do, especially if you're new. But ultimately, the most creative companies and people are in the cultures with psychological safety. And that's ultimately what you want to increase in your team, to increase creativity and design thinking. And so I talked about the brain trust. The brain trust cannot be successful without a level of psychological safety. So really getting to this ultimate spiciness level is where you're going to be able to learn from your failures, fail fast, move forward to the next idea, and learn from it without holding someone specifically accountable or pointing fingers at somebody for the failure. So this is, again, the deepest thing that you can do to really increase and have a best practice of design thinking. So some homework for you. I would not be a lecturer or professor without giving you some. So write this down. Create your failure resume. What was one of your biggest failures and what did you learn from it? And specifically dig deep, right? What was something in life that you want to reflect on or in your career, and what did you really learn about yourself, your interests? And to take it a step further, if you're comfortable, I would challenge you to share this with someone, whether it's a friend, a family member, a colleague you trust, or even in a team environment. We just did an icebreaker not that long ago within my team, and the question that came up was, what's a mistake that you made recently? And sharing it with the team. And I was so surprised how authentic and vulnerable everyone was in the team with sharing what it was that they failed at. And we learned so much from that opportunity. So I would encourage you, if you want to be super spicy, to go forward with writing your failure and sharing it with your team. So in summary, what did we learn today? Our theme is courage to create, and I hope that you all have the courage to create and dive into design thinking as a result of this presentation. So what is design thinking? We talked about it being a process that ultimately starts with the end user or the customer and keeping the customer in mind throughout the end-to-end process. Design thinking ultimately leads to innovation. And again, invention and innovations are not the same thing. What is the design thinking process? So we talked about that: empathizing, defining, ideating, prototyping, and testing. And I talked through with you some of the techniques that you could use in each of the phases as you move your product or your idea down the design thinking process. And then lastly, how do you become a better innovator, or how do you become a better design thinker? We talked about the different 4 spiciness levels. So again, building your discovery skills, looking at the Q&A and focusing on those skills, moving from behavioral to cognitive skills, and ultimately to innovation. We talked about becoming T-shaped. So again, thinking about what you want to have deep technical expertise in, and then keeping in mind the breadth of knowledge across the other pillars and the other areas in your team, and networking with your team. And then third, we talked about forming a brain trust. So really thinking about how you can bring a collaborative group of people together, similar to Pixar, to really talk through your ideas and build upon one another. And lastly, the sharing your failure. So encouraging you to take the homework assignment that I gave you and really thinking about a time that you may have failed, and even taking it a step further, if you can, to share your failures with someone. That ultimately will help you become a better innovator and your colleagues, and to build psychological safety and trust. So thank you so much for having me today. It was an honor to present. Keep it spicy, so think about how spicy you want to be. And if you want to stay in touch, please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Thank you.
Thank you, Janine. That was great. Now, for those who are interested in building your first Android app, we have a session just for you. Let's welcome Meghan Mehta, who will be talking about how to build your first Android app.
Hi, I'm Meghan Mehta, a developer advocate on the Android team. Happy International Women's Day. I'm so excited to be here and show you how to build your first Android app with Kotlin. Before we get started, who am I? Why am I talking to you about this? I've been at Google on the Android team for 2 years. I'm a USC graduate with a degree in computer science, an opera singer, and a lover of improv and sketch comedy. Our talk today assumes that you have basic knowledge of the Kotlin programming language and Android Studio. If you don't have either of these, don't worry. Still watch the talk, see how the app comes together, and then use the resources I'll give you to get up to speed. So what are we making today? We are making a dice roller app. When you press the button, it will generate a random number from 1 to 6. So let's get started. If you don't already have Android Studio downloaded, make sure you download it. I have the link right there. And once you're in Android Studio, we're going to create a new project. We're going to choose an empty activity. We're going to name it Dice Roller, make sure the language is Kotlin, and make sure the minimum SDK is API 19. Now that you've done that, we're going to create an emulator if you have not already created one. So on Android Studio, we're going to go to Tools and then click AVD Manager. From there, we'll click Create Virtual Device. Choose a Pixel 4 and choose R as the system image. You might have to download this. You can give it a fun name, but other than that, just keep the defaults here. And now that you have a shiny new emulator, you can press the play button on the top pane, and your emulator will show a blank application that says Hello World. Congrats, you ran your first Android app. So this isn't the Android app that we're creating in the talk. So let's get into that. Let's figure out what it's going to look like. On the left pane, we're going to go into the res folder, into the layout folder, and then click on activity main.xml. You'll see something that looks like this. Cool. What did we just do? So what we just did is we clicked on the text that said Hello World and we updated it to say IWD 2021. Then we scrolled down and we made the text bigger. When we run the app like we ran it before, let's see what it'll look like. Now, instead of Hello World, you have a larger text and you have it saying IWD 2021. You can play around with that. You can change the text to say whatever you want. You can have it say your name, your best friend's name, anything. So now that we have IWD 2021, we want to add in the button. Great. So what we just did is we took a button from the palette, which has different views that you can use. We dragged it in and we changed the text to say roll dice. Now let's run the app and see what happens. Okay, so it looks like the view is showing up in the top left corner. This is because we haven't specified where we want it to be placed. The initial text has a default of being in the middle of the screen. So now we have to specify where we want our button to be. We want the button to be below our text that says IWD 2021, and we want it to be centered. To do this, we're going to hold the white circle with blue border and drag it all the way to the right, and then we're going to take the left circle and take it all the way to the left. This is going to center the view. Next, you're going to take the top edge and drag it to the bottom of the IWD text. Now, run your code. Yay! You have it centered and right under the IWD text, right where we want it. Now we're going to click on the button, and on the right pane, we're going to give it an ID of button. This pane will pop up, and we're going to click refactor. And we're going to do the same thing with the text view. We're going to give it an ID of text view, refactor it, and refactor it for that. Now you'll notice on the top right that there's 3 things. It says code, split, design, and we're currently on the design tab. So if you go over and click on the code tab, you'll see that some code has been generated for you. There's a text view and a button, just like we had in the design tab. This is code that's generated whenever we change anything on the design tab. So as you can see, the text says IWD 2021 on the text view. The text size is 30 as we updated it to be. And the ID is text view. Now for the button, we have an ID of button, a text of roll dice, and you can see that the constraints are as we set them. As you can see, the constraint is the end of it is constrained to the end of the parent, the start of it is constrained to the start of the parent, and it's constrained to the bottom of the text view. This is what we did earlier when we took the right and dragged it all the way to the right, we took the left and dragged it all the way to the left, and then took the top and constrained it to the bottom of the text view. The next thing we're going to do is turn on auto imports. For Mac, you're going to go to File, New Project Settings, Preferences for New Projects, and for Windows, you're going to go to File, Other Setting, Setting for New Projects. You'll make sure that Add Ambiguous Imports on the fly are enabled for both Java and Kotlin, and also optimize imports on the fly are enabled for both Java and Kotlin. This will come in handy in our next step. So now we have some text, we have a button, but we want to make the button interactive. On the left pane, open the Java folder and then open up the first folder that says com.example.diceroller. Then open up the main activity. So now we're in an activity file, but what does the activity file actually mean? An activity provides the window in which your app draws its UI. In your main activity code, you need to provide details on the activity's layout and how the user should interact with it. The Android system calls the onCreate method of your main activity when your app is opened for the first time. The onCreate method sets up the main activity by using code from imports and by setting the starting layout with setContentView. SetContentView specifies and inflates activity main as its layout. So now we're going to want to interact with our button. So we're going to create a value called rollButton, and we're going to give it a type of button. We're going to use something called find view by ID, which is going to find a view based on the ID specified. And that's why earlier we specified the button with an ID and the text view as an ID. We're going to use find view by ID, type r.id, and then give it the ID of button. And so now roll button is associated to the button that we created in our layout. At this point, this is what your onCreate code should look like. Now we're going to set an on-click listener on our button. And this is where we can specify what to do when the button is clicked. Just to show what this is going to look like very quickly, we're going to use a toast. A toast is just a way to specify text that's really that pops up on the screen. And so we'll say toast.makeText this, which is the activity, dice rolled as the text, and give it the length of short. Then we're going to call show on the text so it'll show itself. This is what the on-click listener will look like with the toast inside of it. And this is what the main activity will look like with everything together. And let's see what happens. On the bottom, it has a little pop-up that says dice rolled, which is exactly what we wanted to, and it happened when we pressed the button. We have a toast showing, but that's not really what we wanted to happen when the button's pressed. We want to update the text above. So in the same way that we associated the button from the layout to the activity, we're going to do the same thing for the text view. We're going to create a value, set it as the text view, and use find view by ID with the ID we set earlier. So we have a value, result text view, of type text view, and we're going to use find view by ID with the ID text view, which we set earlier. Just to demonstrate how this works, we're going to set the result text view to 6 when we press the button. Make sure that you have erased the toast code, and now we're going to have the result text view in, and we're going to set the result text view's text to 6. And let's see how it works. When we press the button, our text turns to 6, exactly what we wanted. That's great. So we have the text view setting to 6. It's what we wanted to happen with that code. But now we want to connect the dice's logic. This is how we generate a random number in Kotlin. What this says is generate a random number from the lower bound to the upper bound, the lower bound being 1 and the upper bound being 6. We want to set the result text view's text to one of those random numbers. So we'll set the result text view dot text to the number that's generated. If you type in this code right now, you'll get an error. So why is that? Result text view is expecting a string, and we are giving it a number. So we have an easy fix to that. We're going to call the toString method on it, which will convert our random number into the correct string format that the result text view's text is expecting. So this is what the full code in the main activity class should look like. And that is our final app. Congratulations, you built a dice roller app, and I highly recommend learning even more by taking the Android Basics course, which is online and free. If you have never coded before, if you don't know Kotlin or Android at all, you can start at the very beginning. And if you learned from this and you want to keep going, there's many more units after this of things that you can learn. My name's Meghan. You can connect with me on Instagram. I'm at AddressyEngineer, and I'm so excited for your journey in Android.
Thanks, Meghan. Up next, we have Allison Kelly sharing her story and musing on why women are underrepresented in STEM.
Hello, my name is Allison Kelly. I am the growth marketer and engineer of Botmock, which is a small startup, about 6 people on the team. Yeah, cool. And I will go ahead. So my story begins in 2010 when I was a transferring sophomore to the University of Illinois at Chicago. I was living in a new city, which meant living this new life, becoming a new representation of myself. The anonymity of being one amongst millions meant I could be anybody at all. But one bright late summer morning, I walked into my first class with confidence. And I tucked my sundress underneath my seat, sat down, turned to my neighbor, and before I could say a single word, he turns to me and he says, I think you're in the wrong classroom. This is computer science. And his words were not unkind, they were not malicious, and he was genuinely trying to be helpful, which he was, because I was in the wrong classroom. But it would really take me years before I realized the subtle subtext of his statements, that the one thing that set me apart in that classroom was the fact that I was a woman, and I was literally one of 2 women in the classroom. And these, innocent but sexist microaggressions will plant themselves in the mind of a young girl, and they will germinate and they will grow until we find ourselves battling these feelings of not belonging. The following year, I found myself sitting across the dinner table from my boyfriend's parents for the first time when his dad looks at me and says, I bet you're a communications major, aren't you? And again, nothing that had been said that entire conversation would have alluded to my major. And he was right, I was a communications major, but it was because I was a woman. In those 2 short sentences, calling out my otherness in a field that's dominated by men in computer science, and another devaluing my choice as a woman to choose a communications degree. They were subtle and insidious, and they caused years of damage to my confidence as a professional. And unfortunately, I know that I'm not alone. In 2012, the year I graduated, computer science degrees were awarded to only 18% of women. And more surprisingly, that's 10% less than the year 2000, where women earned nearly 1 in 3 computer science degrees. And last year, only about 20% of Y Combinator winter batch applicants were women. So there's this culmination of frequent sexist microaggressions that causes what's called sexism-based traumatic stress. And researchers theorize that the affected individuals will internalize this discrimination and adopt the demeaned persona, which continues to contribute to mental health effects such as negative self-worth. This internalized misogyny alters our understanding of ourselves and diminishes our ability to support other women. And I can tell you, in my early 20s, the success of women I knew only acted to bolster my shame and feelings of inadequacy in my professional life. And it also made me resent them in a way. And these feelings weren't active, they weren't at the forefront of my mind. I outwardly celebrated them, but it wasn't until I really realized that it wasn't my fault that I thought this way. It's not the fault of the oppressed that our minds gravitate towards such distorted forms of thinking. And it's not until you do realize what's at play that you can proactively resist internalizing sexist microaggressions, learn to heal, and finally celebrate yourself and celebrate your womanhood and the professional endeavors, whether or not you're in a male-dominated field. I eventually leveraged my experience in marketing and my certification in data science, which was partially paid for by a scholarship designed to bring more women into the field, to eventually lead the growth strategy for a small startup, small tech startup where I am now. And many of you that are listening to this talk probably overcame the trauma that you probably didn't even realize you had to become successful in technology. But how do we get to a point where we don't need scholarships to incentivize women to achieve an education in technology? Does it start with Data Science Barbie? Does it mean that you have to challenge the assumptions of your boyfriend's dad at the dinner table, embarrassing yourself, even though he is the one that should be embarrassed? Maybe, but I believe that it starts by just being aware of the microaggressions, which diminishes their power and gives you more of an opportunity to feel compassion for yourself. And with this understanding of ourselves and our womanhood and the world around us, we can set an example for the women and girls in our lives who may be struggling with it themselves. And every time I find myself feeling intimidated by another woman's career path, I speak the words out loud. What an inspiration. How can I be more like her? And every time I'm crushed by the overwhelming and dreaded imposter syndrome, I remember the many times that colleagues have told me that they were happy that I was on their team. By actively acknowledging the collective trauma of women when it comes to our education and professions and teaching ourselves to have self-compassion, we can then alter the conversation and protect one another and the girls that will follow in our footsteps. Thank you so much for joining my talk. And you can find me on LinkedIn. My name is Allison Kelly, ALLISONKELLY. Thank you.
Finally, our last session is coming up. Join me in welcoming Eleanor to talk about how data scientists, who are also mothers of young children, are coping with school closures and childcare uncertainties during COVID-19, and what this says about our society as a whole. Let's welcome Eleanor.
Hi, my name is Eleanor Fournier-Toombs, and I'm a data scientist. I work at the World Bank and as a professor at the University of Ottawa. And I'm speaking to you today about working moms in data science during COVID-19. Just about a year ago, my partner and I received an email from our oldest son's school. Just like everyone around the world, we'd been following the news with growing anxiety. And by that time, we knew what was coming. Spring break was just ending, and to be honest, I have absolutely no idea of what we did. Did I take time off, go sledding, go to the museum? I really have no idea. All I remember is that schools closed, first for a single day, then for 6 weeks, and then of course for the rest of the school year. Because our oldest was only in pre-K, there wasn't much that he could do online. So once or twice a week, he met with his class for about an hour to listen to stories. He liked to put his eye into the camera and fall off his chair. All around the world, children started shifting to online learning, and in a lot of cases, they had their daily lessons through public televisions. Any extra help that families used to rely on evaporated: daycares, nannies, extracurricular sports, grandparents, neighbors. Each one of us was alone in our family bubble. Immediately, working moms started to raise the alarm. So before the pandemic, working women in Canada already did 28 hours of domestic work per week, 50% more than working men. In the US, numbers were very similar, with the majority of working mothers saying that they had more childcare responsibilities, from supervising homework to coordinating pickup and activities to communicating with teachers and dealing with all kinds of emergencies. So during sick days, snow days, or pandemics, women were 8 times more likely to take the day off for work than men. I actually think that this is an underestimation for many women. I tried to calculate how many hours I spent with my children before the pandemic, and I came up with 49 hours per week. So that's 5 hours on each weekday and 12 hours on each weekend day. And that doesn't include nighttime wake-ups. So now that schools were closed, and for many people, they have been closed or moved online for a year now, working moms who were already overworked have had 40 more hours a week of childcare, 20 if this is split evenly with their partner. This has meant different things in different professions. In both Canada and the US, for example, the vast majority of frontline health workers, teachers, and elderly care workers are women. They've often been allowed special childcare, but have had to deal with sending young children to unfamiliar temporary environments. I think this has been extremely stressful for many families. Newspaper outlets have started to report that women are dropping out of the workforce. 20,000 Canadian women left the workforce between February and October 2020. In the United States, it was 900,000 women for 300,000 men in approximately the same period. Working moms have also begun experiencing mental health issues, with the Leger polling firm estimating that 40% of Canadian women between the ages of 18 and 34 are experiencing bad or very bad mental health right now. On the other hand, the pandemic has led to an increase in relevance for the field of data science. Everywhere there has been data analysis. How do we track the spread of the disease, measure its severity, correlate comorbidities, understand the most vulnerable, predict the impact of non-pharmaceutical interventions, predict occlusions, track variants, find cures? The list goes on. From December 2019 to January 2020, Enchen Deng, a first-year PhD student at Johns Hopkins University, heard from his family in China about the spread of the virus. In January, he started working on a case tracking website that would soon become one of the most visited sites of the pandemic. Many other data scientists started to work on case analysis, pouring through the data in order to understand how the virus spread and what made people more vulnerable to severe infection than others. Others started developing predictive models, which showed how non-pharmaceutical interventions like school closures and social distancing would impact the case count and hospitalization rate. These models have informed policy decisions in each country around the world, and have created the new society that we live in today. So seeing women in the workforce being muzzled, on the one hand, unable to work, completely overwhelmed by work, and this incredible rise in the importance of data science and technology to address this emergency, I asked myself, what does this mean for women in data science? What does it mean to have this extraordinary opportunity to apply our skills to help solve a global crisis, while at the same time being more busy than ever, completely exhausted by an enormous increase in household responsibilities? At the time, I was working at the United Nations on the development of a model that would predict the spread and severity of the virus in countries that were already in a humanitarian crisis. Like many of my colleagues and friends who had children, I developed a double life, working shifts of 1 to 2 hours during the day, which I used mostly for meetings, and then catching up with coding late into the night. One of my friends told me, I love my job and I'm very good at it, but I have no bandwidth to help at all with the pandemic right now. I'm completely powerless to seize new opportunities and show my worth. Another friend who worked as a knowledge manager in a law firm told me in April, it has been 46 days. She was counting, 46 days straight of working in shifts, breastfeeding while on calls, working until midnight. So why is this particularly a problem for data science? Well, when I teach, I talk about the key skills in data science, which I think are creativity, drafting innovative methodologies for vaguely defined problems, often with no support, precision, ensuring that the data and code have no errors, checking all the calculations and assumptions, which is a huge amount of responsibility, focus, diving into a problem and really thinking it through, communication, presenting results in an engaging way, and leadership, guiding people to jointly implement the solution, such as other data scientists, product owners, or even policymakers. But what happens when we don't have time to think? In reality, none of the things that we just discussed are possible. Or if they are, it's only with great effort, something that cannot be sustained for 1 year and counting. By not adequately supporting working mothers, we have deprived ourselves of a huge segment of the population. 10% of the population in Canada and the US are working mothers of young children. This percentage of the population have the expertise to lead the country out of the pandemic. From the beginning, governments knew that women were adversely affected by school closures. I actually wrote my first op-ed about this in May, and by that time, hundreds of other articles had already been written by women trying to raise awareness to this issue. By now, thousands more have written and spoken about the disproportionate impact of the pandemic on women's work, mental health, and economic situation. This is not a problem for each individual woman having to manage her work-life balance properly. This is a systemic societal issue which existed before the pandemic and has only gotten worse. What many don't realize, I think, is that the loss of contributions from women in this sector came at a time when we needed them more than ever. Over the last year, women who have been able to work have been recognized for their incredible contributions to the crisis. Women like Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, who is also a working mom, and has been praised for her calm and empathetic leadership of the country. Women like Teresa Tam, who is a doctor and Canada's Chief Public Health Officer, and a multitude of epidemiologists, physicists, and machine learning scientists who I have met through my work. It has been said that women have been better able to lead through this crisis. This chart from the Harvard Business Review, published in December 2020, showed that women in the United States are currently seen as more effective leaders than men, particularly during this crisis. Perhaps this is because in order to succeed in our society, women still have to work so much harder than men to break through the glass ceiling, and they have therefore accumulating more skills and experience. Perhaps it is also because, having been responsible for so much more care work of children, of elderly parents, and others in their lives, they are much more able to deal with the vulnerability, pain, and distress that arise during a crisis. Regardless, it is not too late to act. There is still plenty of work to do to navigate through the rest of this crisis. to determine the best policies to make it through the winter, to optimize the distribution of vaccines, to work out recovery plans that will lead us out of this pandemic stronger than ever, with common global commitments to inequality, climate change, and education. So what can we do about this now? First, I think we need to acknowledge that gender imbalance in domestic labor doesn't just affect working mothers. It affects all of society, who loses their critical skills and leadership. Maybe the pandemic would have been better managed if we hadn't muzzled so many working mothers during the last year. Maybe some of the women who were struggling to tune a random forest algorithm with a little child screaming for a snack right beside them could have come up with something really innovative. So let's not continue this mistake. Let's start now to make sure we get them the time and space they need to think, analyze, and lead us through the rest of this crisis. Second, we need to urgently support working moms who are drowning right now, having burnouts and dropping out of the workforce. And supporting them doesn't just mean giving them some money so that they can take time off. In many ways, taking care of children full time, particularly with this looming economic crisis, when women have to compete for their jobs, is actually more stressful and tiring than working at your actual job. So it means rethinking how education and childcare will take place, providing options for nannies and multiple family bubbles, and being generally much more creative in how we address this issue. Third, I really think we need to encourage the men that have stepped up at home during this crisis, who have done their fair share and started to experience what it was like to be a working mom all along. A lot of people have said that the crisis, having the women completely overwhelmed and burned out, have forced men to take on much more care work than ever before, and that everyone is better for it. I've certainly seen this in my life, and I hope that this is a trend towards equalizing household work and finally getting rid of the woman's second shift. If we do all this and get these talented women back in full form in the workforce, who knows what will be possible next? Thank you so much for your time.
I'm super excited for our next guest speakers, who will be sharing what it means to have the courage to create space for others to rise. Welcome, Lindawi and Carrie.
Hello, all, and thank you so much for joining us for this session today. I'm super excited because I am with one of my partners, and we are going to be talking a little bit about the courage to create space for others to rise. My name is Lindawi Davis.
Hi, I'm Carrie Yen.
And a little bit about me, I am a diversity, equity, and inclusion program manager lead working at Google. I specifically work within an engineering organization, driving, co-leading strategy alignment around how we can increase the culture within the org, increase sentiment, increase feelings of inclusiveness, but also having programming that works for everyone to show up to and build that education awareness around.
A little bit about my background. I'm a program manager on the Federated Security team under Privacy, Safety, and Security, where I lead the efforts on our community and engagement workstream, as well as the operations for our core team.
That's pretty delicious, Carrie. So I guess we're going to jump right into it. You know, when thinking about women rising and what that means to you, right? What does that look like within the past 5 years of your life, professionally, personally? And what are you looking forward to?
What it looks like for women rising, especially for myself in the past 5 years, you know, it really has shifted, especially due to COVID. And I think right now there are expectations and unrealistic expectations when it comes for females and how we're viewed. We are supposed to be acting a certain way. We're supposed to be dressing a certain way and be presenting ourselves and behaving a certain way. And we're living up to these standards that are unrealistic.
You hit that right on the nail, right? I think about what it means to rise, right? Just in your professional career, there's all of these check boxes, right? That we feel like we have to adhere to. A lot of the times, you know, if we don't meet those check boxes, either those social constructions that have been placed on us, but also the ones that we place on ourselves, we start to feel like we're failing, right? But the last 5 years for me has really meant that I've been flexible, right, in the rise to where I am today, because my background is in finance and marketing and publishing and branding, et cetera. But how I've gotten to Google and beyond, right, with some of the projects and things that I'm involved in has been a direct result of being flexible. Does that kind of resonate with you as well?
Absolutely, especially when you touch point about checking the box. I think probably 5 years ago, I felt that I had a laundry list of accomplishments that I needed to hit before specific milestones to please actually those around me and also society as well. There's a stereotype that women need to have that white picket fence, the 2.5 kids, that they need to be the overall caretaker and also excel and at work as well professionally. And reflecting back, especially recently, I've accepted that I don't need to check that box and that I've had to learn and grow that I can look at my imperfections perfectly. And the number one thing that I have learned in the past 5 years is that I need to take care of myself, because I'm a caretaker for my loved ones as well, for my parents. And it's important for me not only take care of myself physically, but also mentally as well. Because if I don't have a stable foundation, I won't be able to take care of those around me as well.
Yeah, and that also affects the rise. You just dropped an amazing gem, right? With the whole accepting that imperfections perfectly. Oh man, that's a whole line right there.
So, you know, when we talked about professionally, what are some realizations that you've had working in tech? For example, you know, any examples? And then also, what has shaped your approach on how you navigate through those environments in a predominantly male space, being in tech?
Ooh, Now, this is a deep one, and we could probably be here all day, right? We've got volumes just between the two of us. But some of the realizations that I've had is a lot of times you feel like you're in survival mode, right? When you're working in any professional space that is predominantly male. And most certainly when you are a person of color, right? Like the navigation tools are not always as clear. And so you had touched on this or was getting ready to touch on this, that it's super important to have like that network or tribe of people who kind of just roll with you, right, along on your journey. These folks can be professionals, these can be friends, it could be family. But one of my strongest realizations is that a lot of times you feel like you're in survival mode. And then the second thing is that you've got to have a tribe of people that you travel with as you're rising in your career.
Absolutely. I've learned the hard way, actually. Really, it's very, very important to have advocates around you. Absolutely. And to also surround yourself with those that will also uplift you and empower you as well. So absolutely.
I love it. I love that. Speaking of, that kind of touches on this next segment, right? Where we're kind of talking through our own personal power. How do you recognize your personal power, or when did you recognize it, and how has it carried you through your career?
My personal power is this joke within information security. It's the stereotype that all of us are special snowflakes. That is my personal power. I realize that I am unique. I don't check all the boxes, and I don't have that traditional background that those in my profession do as well. And that's what makes me unique and a special snowflake. I can come in with a different perspective, and doesn't mean it needs to be 100% right all the time, but with the different perspective encourages and gives an opportunity for collaboration and innovation as well. So curious, what's your yeah.
I think with my personal power, man, I am someone who's able to take like quiet spectators into full-on participants in various situations and various projects. And because I work in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space, it's you have to have that kind of personal power within you to be that pathway builder and a person who has a high level of diplomacy as well. And so those things have always kind of carried me through, even when I was facing, I'll call them nemesis from the past. Because as a woman working in tech and just being a professional for as long as I've been, there's always been some nemesis or barrier that has jumped out of somewhere. And I've had to tap into my level of diplomacy and how I speak to people, right? So they understand how to respect me, but also so that they understand that either way you cut it, I'm going to rise above all of this.
Absolutely. I can't agree with you more on your last statement.
Yeah.
And I'm very curious, has there ever been a defining moment in your life that you put on a path to understand your personal power more?
Ooh, I think when I think about when I was a kid, there were so many moments. Like I had the kind of mother who was very much interested in education, very much interested in making sure she let myself and my brothers know that, you can live this life and live it in a way that's filled with a lot of honor and a lot of integrity and mistakes as well. And one of the biggest things she taught us was around like speaking up for yourself, right? Which is where that level of diplomacy, I think, started for me. And that started way back when I was probably 13 years old. And we were leaving we were coming from New York. I'm not originally from New York, but this is where I'm stationed right now. And so when I was a kid, I lived here for a little bit of time, and we ended up moving to the West Coast in Arizona. And what's interesting about that is that when I had to transfer schools, the schools that I was going to at the time trying to put me into some sort of reading class, right? And I had already tested out of reading. I was, an honor student and was a bit more advanced. And so I spoke up and said, listen, I'm not supposed to be in this class. And no one believed me. So then I told my mother what was going on. my mother went down to the school and there was a bit of a back and forth, but ultimately they took me out of the class and put me in the advanced class because I had already tested out that. But it taught me that right off the bat, you have to speak for yourself and you have to know where you are in your life. And at 12 years old, I had a level of self-awareness that was very strong about where I was going.
Thank you so much for sharing that story and making yourself vulnerable. That's such a great story. Speaking about childhood, one thing that comes into mind is actually my grandmother. So it took me probably moving in my 20s, going to school and starting off my career, to really reflect back and really understand her power and her personal struggles as well, coming from Hong Kong and leaving her life to come over and to immigrate over to America to help support my parents as well. I think about that, especially when I was in college too, and just trying to just navigate through life in my 20s and always wanting to, in a way, to quit. And you realize, reflecting back, that how much the struggles is, thinking how my grandmother had to learn how to navigate through a new world in a language that she didn't know, in a culture and customs that she wasn't aware of.
With all of those amazing experiences, and between the two of us, I imagine we could write a book, right? Some sort of graphic novel or a series with a mainstay character. But how have some of those positive experiences that you've had in your life through all of that absorption, right, from the time you were a kid up until now, impacted others? And how do you want to continue to kind of impact people in their, climb to where they want to go?
Yeah, one thing that comes into mind is that pay it forward mindset. I think of those in the past that have been advocates and for mentors to me, that have guided me, that have watched me take a path where I didn't succeed, but they still stood by me. And they knew that ultimately, in the end, that I would learn and grow as an individual, professionally and personally, through those situations as well. And I reflect back, it's important to pay it forward as well. So that's why when I mentioned earlier that advocacy and making sure that you have allies and a strong network or surrounded by you is so important.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of advocacy and mentorship and sponsorship, right? Those three things, they fall within the same family. But for me, when it comes to like all of those experiences and all that wisdom that I've just been absorbing throughout my years as a professional, I always let people know right away that, when you're trying to get from point A to point B, you have to be very honest about, where you're trying to go. You have to be honest about where you are as a person as well, and think to yourself, listen, I can do this thing, right? And if this thing doesn't work out for me, if this one little thing doesn't work out for me, I'm not going to stop. I'm going to go to the next thing, right? And figure out how I can take myself from that one little failure that resulted in me trying to me trying again and using the wisdom that I picked up from that previous quote unquote failure. That's a little bit of that wisdom that I always kind of give to younger people, but most certainly to other women as well, just to kind of open up the hope factor, right? The hope factor, as I call it, it's probably called something else in other circles, but I typically refer to it as like my hope factor or my hope tank. And I'm like, get in the business of making sure that your hope tank is super full, because the ride is not easy, right? When you're on the rise, it's not meant to be, because otherwise you didn't really earn it, right? So that's typically how I take, like, whether the experience was positive, whether it was a negative experience, whether it was a failure, what have you. I take all of that and I give it to people in a way that it's tangible for them to understand that I'm here for you and that I'm a human being just like you. And sitting in this seat, right, was not an easy feat in any way, shape, or form.
Absolutely. I love your comment about the hope tank as well. If you don't mind, I'm going to take that.
Yeah.
Put it in your pocket. And I think it's really important too that we need to look at those with the vulnerabilities and also embrace it as well. And then also share our losses. I think that we do live in a world where women have to live in perfection and whatnot. And we don't talk about the stories where there was failure. There were nights where, you know, whether you want to cry in a pillow, scream in a pillow, cry in the shower. And I think just being raw and authentic, telling those stories as well can help others and the next generations grow professionally. Because like you said, it took a lot for both of us to get here and to be in these chairs. It was not an overnight success as well. There were so many barriers, and so much struggle as well. But knowing that they are not the only ones struggling, and so that there is a time and that there's a path for them as well.
Yeah, I think that that's spot on. Like there's no easy way, you know, to the top, right? And you can try to take the elevator, feel free, but the elevator's got to stop at some point. It's got to stop on this floor. It's got to stop on the 5th floor. It's got to, you know, continuously stop. And so I think there's a level of patience that's kind of attached to that too. As like if you're on the elevator and you're in a certain position and a door opens, since we're rolling with this analogy, and we see a younger person coming up or just another person who has made the decision to change their life and they get on the elevator, why not give them that additional space, right? To feel a bit more comfortable. That's kind of how I put it into practice. Like I want people to feel like when they come and talk to me, for example, that they are talking to someone who not only has the experience to back up what I'm saying, but I also there's a level of wisdom that comes with being of a certain age, right? And then there's another layer of that. I also happen to be a POC. I'm this amazing Black woman walking around. And there are so many things to consider as a result of walking around in this vessel that I'm in that I'm super proud of. But there are other people who may not be in this vessel. So I want to create space for them as well, to have that kind of collaboration and camaraderie. And for us to remember that, and for everybody to remember that, don't believe the hype that women do not hype up each other. I hype up Carrie, I should say. I hype up all kinds of people on a regular basis because it just comes natural to me. I'm not missing out on anything by doing so.
Absolutely. It is so important to advocate and also empower and also hype up the other females as well. So thank you.
For sure. So talking a little bit about accountability, right? This is a word that's just been flying around, you know, especially I think last year there were so many things that happened, so many atrocities, and the amount of violence that continues just in general, whether it's against women, Black plus folks, the LGBTQ community, Asian plus folks, like there is always something going on and to consider. And so the word accountability really continues to kind of pop up, right? Especially in professional spaces. So I think I want us to kind of talk about how do we plug accountability into this picture of making sure that we're giving space to, you know, other women to rise as well. Like, what do you think the pathway to being more accountable looks like if you're a manager or even if you're an individual contributor?
Absolutely. You know, there's small little tactical things that I actually do on an everyday basis. I make sure to cultivate my relationships with the other females within security as well, to really understand them as a person and then also them professionally as well, so that when I'm in a meeting, I can actually speak up on their behalf and give them the opportunity to also voice their opinion. It's simple other things as well. When you notice a meeting invite and it is heavily male dominated, call it out. I sure have, you know, just asking, just like, you know what, I also think that so-and-so would be appropriate to be in this meeting. Does it make sense to add them, even as optional?
I love that, Carrie. I love that. I think the speaking up part is the thing that resonates most with me, that instead of waiting for things to kind of boil over or be swept under the rug, you got to call that stuff out right away. I want to add some things to that list, which is it does not hurt anyone to have a little bit more empathy, right? Like,
absolutely.
to just employ empathy in your everyday life. But most certainly when it comes to professionalism, I think that the empathy, like lifting up your level of empathy and understanding of that, will also take your listening skills up a level as well. Right. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of times we're all trying to tell these stories. We want to make sure that we're acknowledged in the work that we're doing. But a lot of times the work may get, swept under the rug because people are not listening. And to your point, people are not in the room when they should be in the room. So something that I typically like to do, I want to make sure that people get the credit for the work that they're doing. I want to speak up on behalf of folks who are not in the room. And I also want to make sure that I speak up for myself, because that's like the big thing, right? It's not just enough to have your sponsors and your mentors and your advocates in the room dropping your name, from time to time, but you yourself have to believe that you're meant to be in that room as well.
Absolutely. And it's being proud of your work as well. Even though I had an issue, and this is still something that I'm struggling with, is that I need to be very proud of all my work, whether I think it's a small tactical aspect. No, it actually makes huge impact. It does. Whether I think, and I will downplay it as something small and minor, it does. It makes impact org-wide, and also company-wide as well.
Yeah, that's true story. True story. Like, I feel like we're in such a position, like if you're someone who has finally made it to a quote unquote place of privilege when you typically are not known to have privilege. Mm-hmm. I just heard this from another panel that I was involved in, where the question was, you're a Black plus woman. How do you see yourself now that you have a smidge of privilege working in the tech space, doing the work that I do? And so my thought about that was, that's interesting, because in my real life, I'm not privileged per se, but I do work extremely hard, right? Mm-hmm. And because I'm now sitting in the seat that I'm sitting in, I use that seat every chance I get to talk to as many young people as I need to, mentor, raise my hand, and not just raise my hand, but actually take actionable steps behind the raising of the hands. And I think that there's a lot of times, like I see in whether it's in tech or in other industries, where, there's a lot of people who are, raising their hand to do certain things, but that's not the same thing as taking action. So I think that if we want to continue to kind of create that space for women, and I do mean all women, right? People of color, our underrepresented groups, Black plus, Latinx plus, our Indigenous folks, our LGBTQ community, etc. If we want to continue to kind of make sure that folks feel like they're a part of an entire tribe working together and rising together, there is something to be said about making sure that we can activate, but actually understanding that we are moving in the same direction, because that's super important.
Absolutely. Gosh, what you just said is so inspiring right now. I just feel so empowered. So thank you.
Thank you.
Still, yes, thank you.
No, I appreciate you, Carrie. Let's close this out. What was the last thing you thought about in 2020 that you wanted to change, right? And what are you looking forward to this year in terms of assisting and helping women move to their next step?
Reflecting back on 2020, I looked at it as a very check the box. I had that mentality. And up until probably towards the end of 2020, I realized that life is like a marathon. I need to go at my own pace. And as a former ultra marathon runner, I needed to listen to my own words. Yeah. Because no matter what situation it is, everything is like a marathon. You can train for it. You can get your PR, you can train for it, and you can get the time that you maybe didn't desire. You cannot train, and you can injure yourself. There's many consequences, but it's important that everybody goes at their own pace. Any runner will tell you too, when they're running, they'll look at people next to them. You don't know their story. Like I said, I am a former ultramarathon runner, And I am also someone that has been in marathons before. And I looked at someone who had a good 30 plus years on my age. And I was just like, I don't understand. But I need to scale back and remember that I don't know their story. I don't know if it's how long they've been training. I don't know if they're injury prone at all. And so I had to, in a way, check myself. And I think that's something that understanding that life is a marathon was something that really, really hit hard for 2020 on me.
Yeah.
So in 2021, I actually really want to spread that message and spread that word to other females as well, and hope they understand that we do not need to be perfect. We are super women. We do so much. There's unrealistic expectations on us, and it's okay to take a jogging pace. It is okay to walk the marathon, because at the end, all of us get the medal, all of us get the bagels, the bananas at the end, and all of us cross the finish line. We need to just go at our own pace. What about yourself?
I got all the snaps on that one. Yes. When I think about 2020, I think about this level of feeling like you're imperfect, right? Because now, for the year you were at home. Some of us had our kids at home. Some of us were by ourselves. Some of us had our partners, et cetera, et cetera. There's so many layers to explore. But the one thing that kind of kept coming back to me is that we were missing that component of togetherness, right? Because we didn't have our jobs to go to physically, right? And we spend most of our days pre-COVID, we spent most of our days with the people that we worked with, right? And so once that was taken away, we were back in our houses. And with all of those varied situations, there was time to kind of think about how important it is to be together, right? Whether it's with your coworkers who you deeply respect and you have friendships with, whether it's with your family, whether it's with friends, whether it's with your kids, whether it's with your partner, whether it's with your own thoughts. I think that right there was something that was very glaring to me last year. And then when I bring that thinking into this year and how that is super important to me, I just keep thinking about how you really have to remember to speak up for yourself. And in doing so, it makes it easier for you to speak up for others, right? I touched on this earlier, where it's kind of like when you have a strong level of self-awareness about who you are as a person, where you're going, what your goals are, what your strengths are, it's super easy, I think, to speak to other people and help them find their way through that as well, right? But also to amplify that, I think it takes nothing off of you to send somebody some sort of recommendation or reference when they reach out to you and you might know about their work, right? It doesn't take some large amount of energy for you to reach out to someone and just check on them and make sure that they're doing okay. That's both personally and professionally. So the thing I really want to bring into the year and want to keep that going is just like the level of togetherness, figuring out creative ways to be impactful to someone's life that's useful, which is the third thing that I think about. I don't want to sit here and worry about the things that I cannot change. I want to think about what's useful to me. And then also, how is that going to also help other people once I go through the situation as well?
Absolutely.
Well, this has been a delicious conversation, Carrie. I want to thank everyone for tuning into this session. We appreciate you so much. We've enjoyed our time. And much like Carrie has said, much like I said, just remember that you have space on this planet to be who you really want to be and live the life you want to live. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, welcome back to the main track. As we are closing the day out, we would like to share some other regional summits happening around the world for you to join. You can see the dates and countries that are listed on the screen. Find the links of the summits on our website shown on the slide, and also in our follow-up emails since you registered for this event. Hopefully you will enjoy all of the regional summits if you enjoyed this one too. With that said, let's just wrap up this event. Well, thank you so much for supporting IWD North America Summit and choosing to spend these last 2 wonderful days here with us. We hope you all enjoyed and were inspired by the talks, learnings, and discussions of this huge summit. We would like to extend a big thanks to our wonderful speakers and our amazing team who helped put this event together. We appreciate you all for joining us in this moment towards equality. And let's continue to pledge towards a more diverse and inclusive world. Don't forget to share your feedback with us from the link on the screen. You will get a chance to win one of the awesome raffle prizes. And lastly, take care and have a great rest of your weekend.